Mic's on. Test, test.
Good evening, everyone. The December 8th, 2022 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnhart. Ms. Barnhart is present. Mr. Brew. Mr. Brew is present. Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby is present. Mr. Delahaney. Mr. Delahaney is present. Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Mafucci. Mr. Mafucci is present. Mr. Milne. Mr. Milne is present. Ms. Roman. Ms. Roman is present. Chairwoman Smith.
Here.
Chairwoman Smith is present. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Ms. Vasquez Simmons is present, and Mr. Udelson is excused.
Legislators, would you please stand as Legislator Delahaney will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Legislator Delahaney. There are two public hearings scheduled for tonight's meeting. Mr. Clerk.
An affidavit of publication and posting of the notice of the hearings on the assessment rolls of the Pure Waters districts for 2023 and the notice of hearing on the proposed 2023 Monroe County budget in the Daily Record and the Rochester Business Journal have been received and are on file in the clerk's office.
I now declare open the public hearings on the assessment rolls for the Gates, Chili, Ogden Sewer District, Irondequoit Bay South Central Pure Waters District, the Northwest Quadrant Pure Waters District, and the Rochester Pure Waters District for 2023. Are there any speakers registered for these hearings?
There was no one registered for the hearings on the assessment rolls.
I declare this public hearing closed.
We're good.
Perfect.
Yep.
I now declare open the public hearing on the proposed 2023 Monroe County budget. Are there any questions or any speakers registered for this hearing?
We did have one speaker registered for this public hearing. You will have 2 minutes in which to address the committee, and when the timer sounds, just conclude your remarks. Our speaker is Bridget Hurley. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for this opportunity to speak with you today. Let's get this a little lower. My name is Bridget Hurley. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Children's Agenda, and I'm here with you today to share our annual review of the proposed county budget. Our brief, which you'll get a copy of tonight, includes recommended changes that we believe will benefit children and families in Monroe County. We also commend the county on several of the proposals in the budget, and we include a summary of some of the major programs serving children and families in Monroe County. So I'm going to share very quickly tonight our recommendations, and this will be released tomorrow and spread throughout the community, so you can see it in writing. But I just wanted to start by saying that our children are really struggling. Really struggling. They are struggling in school, with friends and family. They're recovering from trauma, and many of them, including elementary, middle, and high school students, are behind developmentally. So this is a really important budget because we now need to address some of these challenges that our children are facing, and they certainly need our very best efforts. So again, briefly, our recommendations are, and for those of you who have been around, have seen me up here before talking about recommendations, I will say we take a very broad look at the budget this year. So there's not as many as usual. First of all, we're concerned that there are a lot of initiatives around mental health in the community right now, many of them using COVID-related funds, but some not. And it feels as if there is not a lot of coordination. So we're calling on the county to convene a regular set of communications among all of the mental health initiatives in the community so that we're not losing any opportunities through wasted funds or overlaps. We certainly want to make sure we're reaching every single person, particularly youth, who is going to be needing these mental health services. Secondly, we are recommending that the county double its investment in advertising the child care assistance funds. We do not believe that families know about these funds to the extent that they should. And so we're recommending that $100,000 be allocated, and we have some very specific ideas around that, that initiative. Thirdly, we are recommending, again, as we did last year, another initiative around childcare, which is a new model of delivering childcare assistance. That's a contracted model. It actually works better for the family and for the providers, and would save the county some processing time and possibly funds. And finally, we're really strongly recommended that you pass the ARPA funding proposals next Tuesday in your meeting. I'll finish really quickly by saying the Children's Agenda is ready and happy to talk with any of you legislators, not just now, but throughout the year. We are nonpartisan, independent, and really want just what's best for kids in Monroe County. So we would welcome some conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no other speakers on the subject, I declare the public hearing closed. Are there any speakers signed up for the public forum?
We do. We have 2 speakers signed up for the public forum this evening. You'll have 2 minutes in which to address the committee, and please conclude your remarks when the timer sounds. Our first speaker is Jermaine Myers. Our next speaker is Karen Zandy.
I'm glad Bridget went first and moved the microphone. Thank you. So good evening. I'm Karen Zandy. Many of you might know me as the president and CEO of Mary Cariola Center. So thank you to those of you who have been and visited our school. But tonight, I wear the hat of the president of the Council of Agency Executives, representing over 26 nonprofit agencies across Rochester and Monroe County who have been selected through the RFP process as potential ARPA grant recipients. As a whole, we represent well over 1,000 community residents who have signed a petition urging the legislature to approve these grants. Here we are at the holidays, a time to give thanks for what we have, and a time to think about those less fortunate, those who are struggling and hopefully getting the support and services that they need. Our community nonprofits are a vital part of this support and service delivery, filling the gaps to help people who are facing poverty, struggling with addiction, disabilities, homelessness, our veterans, and our elderly. Many nonprofits are struggling to meet the needs of those we serve, as the demands on nonprofits have not only increased in recent years, we are stretching resources and finding creative ways to do more with less in order to meet the rising needs in our community. You have seen it yourselves. And probably many of you have experienced trying to support a loved one, especially in the wake of COVID and its impact. The ARPA grants represent an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of those we serve, your constituents. Under the Bring Monroe Back initiative, the county held public forums, established strategic goals, conducted a competitive RFP process that was open to all qualified community organizations. Ultimately, 40 projects were chosen to receive funding to help communities in need. We're proud to be chosen for funding through the rigorous RFP process so that we can serve low-income, marginalized, and underrepresented constituents in our region. I can name several. I heard the timer. What I'll say at this point is they represent homeless veterans, local food pantry, childcare, workforce development, eliminating barriers to healthcare, domestic violence, mental health clinic, minority and women-owned businesses, helping the elderly navigate our social services and healthcare, food cupboards, and violence reduction programs. I urge you to support and pass this forward for the legislature next week. Thank you.
Our last public forum speaker is Jermaine Myers. This concludes the public forum.
I would like to introduce Robert Franklin, Chief Financial Officer of Monroe County, who's here to present the proposed 2023 Monroe County budget as it pertains to the Ways and Means Committee. We will have questions and answer period following the presentation.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And ladies and gentlemen, Monroe County's operating budget as it pertains to the Ways and Means Committee for 2023. I'm going to start with a pie graph you've probably all seen before. The only thing I'm really going to comment is the percentages you see on this chart. They don't really change a whole lot from year to year. So we'll skip past that. What I would like to get into is really the operating expenses by our object. Whereas the previous pie chart showed you what Monroe County spends its money for, this slide shows what Monroe County spends its money on. You can find pretty much this chart in slightly different arrangement on page 55 of the proposed budget book. Just going line by line, I'll start with salary and benefits. Salary and benefit appropriations next year, they're growing about 10.9%. I'm not sure if that's the largest increase ever, but it's definitely up there. Part of this increase is due to adding additional positions to the table of organization. We've talked about the staffing increases a little bit in the sheriff's office, public safety, the public defender's office, public health, maybe a few others. Just based on averages, looking at the staff additions, it accounts for roughly $10 million of the increase you see on this slide. That's not chump change. 10 million is a lot. The philosophy has been that if we're going to provide a public service, we need adequate staff to provide that service well. I would suggest the more significant impact on this part of the budget and the increase you see is the catch-up we've been playing with employee pay. Most of you know that largely for financial reasons, the county held pretty tight to wage growth in the first 20 years of the 2000s. I'll say from a taxation perspective, we're not going to be able to fix that in just 1 or 2 years. The approach recently has been to settle our union contract negotiations with wage increases that are a little bit better than they were for the past 20 years, and then reevaluate our budget mid-year for off-contract adjustments. I guess my last comment on wages is, I'll phrase it as the interesting impact the pandemic has had. I've commented in previous committees that we've had to bring on new hires in the past 2 years at a significantly higher step in their respective pay groups than we've ever had to do before. And when we have more tenured staff in the same office performing the same role, we have to evaluate special increments for them as well. If I can now turn to our contractual supplies and services, we're budgeting about a 6.4% increase from last year's adopted budget. It's about $26 million. Really, inflationary pressures on commercial services, our insurance premiums, utilities, software licensing and maintenance, chemicals and biologicals used at our 2 water treatment plants, and certainly gasoline and diesel fuel have been driving these increases. Asset equipment and capital appropriations are also increasing, just a little bit though, relatively speaking, 2.3 million. I'll say the lion's share of these appropriations, about 16.6 million, relate to the cash funding of capital projects. And this is what the increase you see on the slide is all about. New for 2023 budget is the cash funding of 2 transportation projects, culvert replacements, and milling, resurfacing, and recycling. I've had my eye on those 2 particular projects since 2018 because we fund them in the CIP every year, and we've funded them every year since like forever ago. I ran a quick debt service calculation. I kind of mentioned this in the Transportation Committee, but I was a little off. So I reran a debt service calculation using these projects' 15-year PPU, period of probable usefulness, and the net interest from our most recent borrowing. The results came back, if we bonded for these projects each year, the annual debt service would exceed the annual project budget in the 11th year, and it would continue increasing each year thereafter until it maxes out in the 15th year. Since I don't see Monroe County not funding these projects, my opinion is just makes more financial sense to save the bond issuance costs and the associated interest and just cash fund these projects through the operating budget.
I'm sorry, point of information.
Ma'am?
I'm thrilled to see an interpreter here today. So I just want to make a note that she's not in the the YouTube feed, so we can just shift your location. I have no idea. This is exciting.
I can't see where the feed is coming through, so I don't know where to stand.
You can do that. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're fine.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you move the camera?
He is the
Thank
moving
you.
camera. Thank
I
you.
was like, I don't know where to go.
Yeah, this is
Thank you.
absolutely needed and appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep.
So this brings me to our debt service budget. Debt service next year is increasing, as you can see on this slide, but as I mentioned in the Transportation Committee, really this line is increasing because we've budgeted $6.1 million for the full redemption of a bond anticipation note. These are really related to 2 different highway lighting projects, which would have a 5-year payback. So if it wasn't for that bond anticipation note, bonded debt service would actually be coming down just slightly. A number I would like you to pay attention to on this particular line is that far right column. Debt service is 6% of Monroe County's budget. That's actually a great number because it's significantly less than 10%. Investors, bankers, our credit analysts all pay attention to the percent of budget that debt service consumes. Debt service exceeding 10% becomes a credit negative because it reduces your budgetary flexibility when times get tough, and it consumes a greater portion of your property tax levy. And then the last item I'll point out on this slide is the $8.2 million decrease in public assistance benefits and Medicaid. I did mention during our Human Services Committee, the reduction you see here is largely due to lower TANF, that's our temporary assistance for needy families, and safety net assistance caseloads. You will see in the budget book a lower daycare subsidy assistance budget because last year's budget, I'll say, was overfunded. And lastly, fewer foster care placements. Now, this decrease is offset by a slight increase in Medicaid due to a higher local share for the Medicaid upper payment limit that I kind of mentioned in our Human Services Committee. That's where we pay the state $1, the federal government pays the state $1, and then the state turns around and sends Monroe Community Hospital $2. If I can turn your attention to Monroe County's operating revenues, this particular pie chart is a graphical representation of our revenues. It's kind of nice, in my opinion. It shows just how favorable and reliable Monroe County's revenue structure is. Many of you have heard us talk about this before. Almost 40% of the county budget revenues relate in some form or fashion to real property taxes. Now, that is viewed by our bankers, investors, and credit analysts as very positive because property tax is a stable revenue source. Now, 40% is high. If you look at our peers, we're probably one of the highest. 40%, that is. The statewide average is closer to only 20 or 22%. Now, on this pie chart, property tax and related items include the 33% you see here for property tax and pilot payments. They're in the bottom left of the slide. It includes the 3% of special assessments. That's all Pure Waters. That's just above the property tax slice. And about half, 3% of the intergovernmental revenue also right above property tax. That intergovernmental line, that's where we put our below the line chargebacks. Now, 15% of our budgeted revenues comes from sales and hotel taxes. Sales tax, as I think many of you know, is a very volatile revenue source, subject to changing local, national, and even global economic conditions. But having such a relatively low percentage of our budget dependent upon sales tax revenues is a credit strength. And by the way, in comparison, the statewide average is closer to 32%. Now, this, of course, is because I think you all know of our county's generous sales tax sharing statute, under which the county retains only about 31% of the tax actually collected. Now, the other major revenue source on this slide is our state and federal aid, which when combined, they account for about 27% of budgeted revenues. This one is also a little interesting. The state comptroller, as well as a number of our investors, refer to state and federal aid as reliance on aid. So I think one can debate whether 27% is too much or too little. But what I'd like to highlight is the state and federal governments are reliable payers. It might take them a little while sometimes, but when we bill them $1, they reliably pay us $1. That's another kind of interesting point, whereas cities and towns are simply allocated funds for their budgets. Think the state's AIM, aid and incentives for municipalities. Our state and federal aid really is all reimbursement for program expenses that we've already paid. Just a quick look at our property tax values, since it is such a stable source. Surprise, surprise, taxable property values grew by more than 13% in the most recent assessment. You need to go back to the early 1990s to see growth of around 13%. For tax cap purposes, the state holds us harmless for growth in the levy due to new construction. A lot of people ask, well, how much of the levy is really attributable to new construction? Depends how you look at it. Using the growth factor provided by state tax and finance and applying that to last year's taxable values, I can estimate that values grew 0.66%. So if you turn that into a levy growth, new construction amounts roughly $2.5 million. Now, that's more than just numbers. Last year's tax base was over $50 billion. A 0.66% growth factor amounts to almost $332 million. So at $7.56 per thousand, that's where I get the $2.5 million. And then, if I may, a quick look at our sales tax collections. We're budgeting sales tax revenue at $195.7 million next year. That's about a 10.5% increase from the 22 adopted budget. So that sounds like a lot, but it is only 0.7% more than we are projecting this year's revenue to end up. So is that a conservative budget? Yes, I would say so. Is it overly conservative? No, I would not share that opinion based on the economic environment. I do know that the Conference Board's leading economic index has fallen 8 consecutive months. They are now predicting a recession beginning at the end of this year and perhaps lasting through the 6 months, June of 23. And I also keep an eye on the personal savings rate. It's a national calculation, but the national rate of savings is running 2.3%, and that is the lowest it has been in my lifetime. It's been below 3% 4 out of the last 5 months, and I know savings rates tend to go up during and after a recession, which means fewer dollars being spent on taxable items. So if we do better than I anticipate next year, I'll have options for your consideration going into the 24 budget. I said last year there's probably as much science as there is art into projecting sales tax revenue. I do model this 2 different ways, and I just let the economic data sway my opinion up or down. We've had a couple good questions during committees about our use of fund balance in the budget, so I'm going to summarize it here on this slide. Within our debt service fund, we have a reserve for bonded debt. These are unspent bond proceeds from capital projects that can only be used for upcoming debt service related to that capital project for which we originally issued the bonds. Cash available for next year's debt service from this specific reserve amounts to $3.1 million. Again, we are using Pure Water's fund balance, but it has been limited to the Rochester district and Arundequoit Bay South Central. I mentioned in EPW committee that we're looking at a rate increase of about 6% next year, each district. And the use of fund balance was a measure to keep rates from going even higher than that. But having said that, those of us in finance will be meeting with Environmental Services Management throughout 2023 to monitor their operations and their budget progression, and we'll determine if we can further limit their use of fund balance during the year. I'll mention both our road fund and internal service fund are using $1 million respectively from their fund balance to offset an increase in the tax levy. And the general fund is using $3.4 million for the same. And I think we've mentioned in public safety, this budget commits $1.7 million out of our general fund to support the sheriff's office and their anti-violence initiatives and collaborative efforts they have with the Rochester Police Department. It includes also the use of $200,000 for climate action initiatives. And then I'll wrap up with just a couple comments regarding budget equity. A number of municipalities across the country have been integrating into their budget process a tool for applying consideration of inclusion and equality when reviewing programmatic funding and policies. Our own Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion has drafted a budget equity tool to assist managers in navigating the areas under their control where impactful change can happen if we take a thoughtful and strategic approach in our budgeting. Their budget equity tool is divided into 4 pillars of equality excellence to be considered when developing budget strategies. Those pillars include planning with intentionality through an equity lens. We know today's social and racial inequities have been cultivated by years of bias, including our own governmental policies and processes. Their second pillar is to understand who we are and know the data. Knowing the demographic makeup of our own staff and the community we serve is crucial to identifying how changes to our programs or processes can impact disenfranchised individuals and groups. And building community relationships. Engaging the communities we serve can help us better understand their needs and help shape more impactful change. And lastly, but one of my favorites, is validate. Equitable change will only occur if there's a continuing cycle of validation and measurement of program objectives. So the draft tool they've prepared asks department managers a series of questions related to each of the 4 pillars and help us think about our programs and budgeting through an equity lens. Such a tool may be overdue here, but nonetheless, it's new to our budget process. So our diversity, equity, inclusion staff is offered to work with us in finance and help us better understand how to incorporate a budget equity tool into the finance department and at least a couple other operating departments. So by getting started now, we'll have time over the next few months to either refine the tool or move forward with it in our 24 budgeting process. Madam Chair, that concludes. Happy to take questions.
As a reminder, as we continue on tonight, all discussions are to be directed through the chair. I will now open the floor to any committee members who have questions regarding the Ways and Means portion of the budget. Legislator Delahanty.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you, Mr. Franklin, for the presentation tonight. Appreciate it. And all the work by your team through budget season this year. As always, I think it's been an excellent presentation so far, and we look forward to asking a few questions this evening. Through the chair, can you provide a breakdown of all travel appropriations within each division of each department whose portion of the budget falls within the purview of the Ways and Means Committee? This should include planned travel, including planned conference attendance.
Madam Chair, we can summarize the travel in our budget.
Thank you. And through the chair, can you provide a breakdown of all cellular telephone appropriations which within each division of each department whose portion of the budget falls within the purview of the Ways and Means Committee? This should include type of device, intended purpose, and associated personnel titles.
Madam Chair, we can summarize the cell phone appropriations in the budget. It is unlikely we'll be able to associate those dollars with specific job titles or type of device.
Okay. And through the chair, can you please provide a breakdown of all positions from all departments within the purview of the Ways and Means Committee portion of the 2023 budget that are authorized, funded, and vacant? This breakdown should include each title and the corresponding budgeted amounts for salary, retirement, Social Security contribution, and medical and dental insurance. Please also indicate the fund, department, and cost centers charged for each corresponding position.
Madam Chair, as I have responded in previous committees, in my memory, the Budget Office has always resisted providing vacancy reports because they are point-in-time data, and since it changes literally on a daily basis, are relatively obsolete as they leave the printer. Going into further detail for each employee by title, including their specific pay, FICA, medical, pension, I would consider privileged communication between the operating department and the Budget Office as we work to build their budgets.
And through the chair, Mr. Franklin, could you take us through page 54 and compare it to last year's fund summary and tax levy computation? It appears that we are using roughly 36 million more in general fund appropriations. How does that compare to previous years, and what is its impact on the county's financial standing?
Ma'am, interestingly, on page 54 of the budget, really does not identify the use of fund balance. And I'm not sure the number the legislator is referring to. I will note for you, since I have the information with me. If you look across the county, using about $22.7 million of fund balance. That is significantly more than last year's. However, I believe I've also outlined where the fund balance is coming from in the presentation. And we can summarize that again, Madam Chair. Our use of fund balance, this is actually a really good question, Madam Chair, because as I've said, perhaps not in committee, but to our own executive administration and the occasional legislator that I have a conversation with about this, use of fund balance needs to be approached thoughtfully and planfully, not the approach of an opportunity to undergo a spending spree. We had significant surplus in our general fund for 2021. It brought us to having more fund balance than our policy guidelines suggest. So we developed a plan for that and had conversations about it. First thing we did was increase the thresholds for the lower and upper limit of our fund balance policy. What we're suggesting in this budget book is a range from $90 million to $110 million. That is roughly, I'm just going to ballpark, 10%, really probably more like 9% of budgeted general fund revenues. That's a good place to be. Previous years, I've had the opinion we ought to shoot for a $65 million fund balance. It's roughly 5% of general fund expenditures. The COVID-19 pandemic illustrated the need to have a fund balance that could carry the county 2 years. So in my opinion, we should be looking closer to 9 or 10%, and that's where that $90 to $110 million gets us. We still have more fund balance than that range. So the thoughtful approach was to come up with a spending plan for that does not adversely impact Monroe County's financial position. We did commit funds to offset a tax levy increase. If the county made money, we're not going to ask the taxpayers to pay that much more in the future year. We did establish a assigned fund balance category for anti-violence initiatives. And this is how we're helping to fund the sheriff's office with $1.7 million. That's $1.7 million per year for 5 years. We've talked about our park system being neglected for the past couple of decades, at least 10, 15 years, if not 20. So earlier this year, the county executive, with this legislature's approval, offered up a referral and then subsequent resolution to transfer $9.4 million of fund balance to our Parks Department for parks-wide facilities improvements. I'm actually okay with funding that because the deteriorating conditions at our shelters and lodges really represented years of foregone maintenance. Repairs and maintenance would have been budgeted in the operating budget anyhow, so I was comfortable using fund balance for that particular capital project. I mentioned I had my eye on the culvert replacement program and milling and resurfacing. Those are 2 projects we budget for every single year, so it just makes sense to use fund balance, not to borrow for the expenses in the current budget, but also the 21 and 22 expenses we've incurred but not yet borrowed for. As we look forward to the remainder of what little is left of 2022, if you looked at the key indicator report, I'm expecting another budget surplus, and I'll be drafting another plan for consideration to go forward. So our use of fund balance, that's a long-winded answer, Madam Chair, but our use of fund balance in this budget was approached thoughtfully and planfully to have no negative impacts on the county budget.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. And at this time, Madam Chair, I will yield the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the administration, a question that I thought of during the course of your presentation, Mr. Franklin, was the use of the county financial enterprise tool of SAP. Are we transitioning out of SAP and going to a different system in the near future?
Madam Chair, excuse me. Monroe County released a request for proposals that are due back December 16th from companies that provide ERP systems. In working with our consultants, we do expect 4 or 5 or 6 proposals, and I would expect SAP to be one of the proposers. So we are looking at a new system. There are more modern versions of SAP. It's really time. Whether we're going to go with a new system or a new company, I can't say yet because the proposals haven't come in, but it's certainly possible. The goal is to have a more intuitive and user-friendly system that our staff are actually willing to use. It can be a little onerous today.
Not as much as Oracle. No, just kidding. Thank you. My next question through the chair on page 56, fund balance net position available. Last year's budget estimated a total general fund balance of $137 million on December 2021. This year's budget shows the actual fund balance in December of 21 is 196.9. Is this all COVID dollars, or what would be the explanation for that?
Ma'am, I'm trying to figure out how best to answer that question. Is it all COVID dollars? No, it is not. But there are a lot of COVID dollars. Our CARES Act funding we received from the U.S. Treasury directly, plus the CARES Act funding that individual departments have received throughout the year, for which we brought referrals to this legislature, are not revenue until we've actually incurred an expense related to the program for which the award was made. So there are quite a bit of COVID dollars, including the American Rescue Plan, that are not revenue. Therefore, it was not part of our income. They show on our balance sheet as deferred revenue. However, the county was able to take advantage in 2020 and a bit of 21 of paying for our own staff who were staffing the COVID testing and vaccination pots. We would have paid those salaries out of property tax, right? So we were able to alleviate some of our costs in that regard. And that's part of the reason why the year-end general fund surplus was higher than originally anticipated.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the chair, could you explain this budget's impact on a single taxpayer? If the tax levy is increasing and we are collecting more money from taxpayers, is the individual taxpayer's obligation increasing? And if yes, is this by choice or based upon something such as increased taxpayer population, et cetera?
Interesting question, Madam Chair. It'd be awesome if taxation were easy. Real property tax is actually quite complicated. I can't stand explaining it because I tend to start getting into the weeds and people's eyes gloss over. So I will try to be as accurate yet engaging as an accountant can be. the property tax levy is rising, right? Roughly $4.9 million. I'm not sure if, to what extent the typical homeowner is going to see an impact on their tax bill. And I say that because we tax based on the full value of a town. So it's kind of like I tax Penfield. I don't tax the homeowner in Penfield. So that's done on full values, equalized full values. The town then, in the process, takes the town levy and divvies it up to each property owner based on their assessed value, which could be different than the equalized full value. Complicating that is the sales tax sharing agreement we have, omitted taxes, blah, blah, blah. We also, as has been discussed in this legislature, not everybody pays their taxes. What counties do is have, we call it the overlay for uncollectible taxes. We look at Monroe County's average tax collection rate for the past 10 years. We're actually very strong. It's like 98% point something, something. And then back off an average of prior year tax collections. So if you don't pay your taxes this year, well, maybe you'll pay it next year or the year after. So we look at those prior year collections and reduce the overlay based on that. Heading into 23, our overlay for uncollectible taxes is coming down. Almost, not dollar for dollar, but it's coming down $4 million in change, which pretty much offsets the increase in the levy. Plus, there are below the line chargebacks as well. This legislature, back in August, authorized an additional $750,000 of sponsor contribution for MCC. That hits our below the line charges. So, Madam Chair, again, another long-winded answer that hopefully the tax bill won't change too much for people. My approach has been a nice, steady approach to taxation, so there's no surprises.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Franklin. And I only ask that question because virtually everything in our lives has gone up, taxes, sales tax, revenue, which of course, if you're, the county of Monroe, that's a good thing, which leads me to my next question through the chair. Regarding the gasoline tax, that's scheduled to sunset, and someone else in administration may have some information on this. That's scheduled to sunset at the end of the year, right? Which I believe the aggregate tax increase at the pump would be 24 cents or thereabouts, right? I think that's based upon $4 a gallon, maybe slightly less.
Yeah, plus or minus a few pennies, Madam
Yeah.
Chair.
So has anybody heard, again, not related to Ways and Means, but it is related to the taxes that we all pay as county residents. Is there any information that we might have regarding if that may be extended or what the county plans on doing after the first of the year?
Ma'am, I have not participated in those conversations.
So you haven't had a conversation with the governor in the last couple of weeks then to the chair?
She doesn't take my calls, Madam Chair.
Okay, next question through the chair and administration. On page 64, detailing hotel tax budgeting, is this the first year we've used such for Frontier Field and Seneca Park Zoo? And if so, why?
No, ma'am. We've used hotel occupancy tax revenues to support Frontier Field and Seneca Park Zoo in the past. I think everybody knows this particular tax took a nosedive during the pandemic, so we kind of cut off revenue to our own budget. Hotel tax revenue for Frontier prior to the pandemic had been around, I want to say $750,000. I know revenue for the zoo was $1.525 million. I would like to get back there, but it would be a measured incremental approach, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Another question to the Chair of the Administration. I believe this is the first time this has been requested, but could Mr. Franklin provide us with an overall picture of the impact of COVID-19 has had on our finances, where we stood prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, and perhaps we did hit some tough points, and now to date. Please include how this continues to impact our general fund, indebtedness, sales tax revenue, hotel motel tax, financial standing, credit rates, et cetera. Mr. Franklin, please take all the time necessary for this overview of the last 2 years up until today. And thank you again for all your past support and helping us navigate through our COVID challenges.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We'll try to write that up
Okay, thank you.
to the legislator's satisfaction, Madam Chair.
To the Chair, to the Administration, Mr. Franklin, it can just be a 1 or 2 paragraph summary. That would be fine.
Okay.
The next set of questions to the Chair are regarding the Board of Elections. Through the Chair, on page 80, under 2022 major accomplishments, it lists you established and implemented a new absentee ballot processing procedure. Is this a system that failed on election night? Could you take a moment to speak about the system disruption and how we will ensure it is ready for the next election?
Through the chair, on election night, our normal procedure for processing absentee ballots is not the procedure you're referring to. The absentee process that is referred to here is the process of now we are forced to open the ballots ahead of time, whereas before they were opened after the election. On election night, our normal procedure was not producing results in a timely fashion, so we utilized a backup system that was able to produce results early morning on November 9th.
Thank you. And through the Chair, on page 80, in the 2022 adopted budget, implementing new voter database system was listed as a major objective for 2022, but it is not included in the 2023's list of 22 accomplishments. Was this implemented?
Through the chair, a new voter registration data system was not implemented yet. We are still meeting with vendors. Currently, there are 3 that are approved through New York State. And as soon as the commissioners feel confident in one of those, I believe we will be ready to move forward.
Okay, through the Chair, as a follow-up question to that, would you anticipate that happening this year?
I believe that is our goal. We really wanted to do it in the previous year, 2022. Unfortunately, one of the systems that was the one we maybe were most interested in didn't get approved till within the last couple of weeks. So I believe that is a goal, as our new current system is slower and it doesn't have many of the features that some of the newer ones do.
Thank you. And again, and through the Chair, on page 82, is invoicing other agencies a new fee structure being utilized that hasn't been utilized in the past? I did not see it in 22 adopted budget.
Through the chair, yes, it is a new structure. The invoicing other agencies is entirely new. That is something that we started in 2022. That is for any of the ancillary elections, such as union elections, school district, Rochester Housing Authority, fire districts, and there will be charges to those to them for running their elections.
Thank you. Next question through the Chair, on page 85, was the increase in affidavit ballots processed at polling places in 2022 simply due to its being a midterm with more voters? And if so, why do you project roughly as many in 2023 when fewer people in the total vote?
Through the chair, I believe that the increase in 2022 was primarily due to the new absentee process. That is, it's a New York State election law now that if you request an absentee ballot, you can only vote on election day or early voting through an affidavit. Therefore, that caused many people who received an absentee ballot to show up on election day and be forced to vote by affidavit. And therefore, that led to the increase. And I do believe that will be an increase, probably at least moving forward, especially in 2023, while it's a relatively new process and people get used to that.
Thank you. Follow-up question to that. How would through the chair, how would the Board of Elections handle that as far as making people aware of that new process or new requirement?
Through the chair, if it is not already on our website, that is something that we can definitely put on our website. I do believe that we have been making people aware, especially like permanent absentee voters that we speak to and that we have assisted with on the phone of the new process. I do think there's always more we can do, and we can definitely investigate that on our end, but we will definitely make our best effort to make sure people are aware that once you request an absentee ballot, you will be forced to vote by affidavit on election day.
Thank you. On page 442, why does the retirement amount vary so much from 2022 requests?
Madam Chair, the proposed budget for '23, about a $40,000 difference from the '22 amended budget. It really is entirely based on the staffing within the Board of Elections. This budget does include 3 additional FTEs and an upgrade. So the pension calculation in each of the departments is nothing more than a mathematical calculation against the various salaries that are pensionable.
Thank you. And a related question to that through the chair of the administration. On page 719, can you explain the 3 FTE difference from 2022 to 2023? It appears that there are 3 new positions. And I'm not sure if there were some deleted positions as well.
Through the chair, the Board of Elections shifted around positions and titles as we needed to throughout the year to better suit our needs. We abolished 4 positions and created 7. And that was the plus 3 difference in full-time positions from 2022 to 2023. I could go over the new titles if you'd like, if you wanted to know which ones those were, but that's the net plus 3 for 2023.
Yeah, through the chair, if you wouldn't mind doing that, I appreciate it.
Through the chair, the abolished positions were a senior voter registration clerk, a clerk 3, a commissioner secretary bilingual, 1 election clerk, and we created an election compliance council, a finance analyst, a recruiter position, in addition to the one we already had, a voter registration activities coordinator, an election clerk, and 2 technician floaters.
No. Yes, and one more question through the chair regarding the BOE, and this is my final question. On page 719, why are the positions classified as BOE or Republican?
Okay, it's on. Through the chair, I believe that came out of this body maybe 2 years ago. But I will say that it does help from our purposes to identify which one is whose position, but I do believe that's where it originated.
Thank you. That concludes my questions for now.
Legislator Endorfer.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration on page 437. Can you explain the quadrupling of the professional services line item in 2022 and almost a six-fold increase this year, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yes, Madam Chair, this is in our communications department. This particular line for professional services, a couple new things here. What I really want to highlight, and I'm not sure if this came up in a previous committee, but this line now includes $120,000 for a county-wide employee recruitment campaign. There has been an employee recruitment campaign contract in our Department of Human Services. This is really to run it countywide because all our departments are having a hard time filling their positions. Somewhat related to that is a $12,000 contract for a media buyer, someone who apparently we don't go out and buy TV commercials. You work through a media buyer to make that happen. So those are the new contracts within professional services line. It also has the regular, what we did last year. There's audio, video, and lighting production for the state of the county, American Sign Language interpreting, and the printing costs for proclamations or other county orders.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, first of all, I've never met a camera I haven't liked. So if you need anything with the media thing, let me know. And second of all, while the copyright and the executive, why are the copywriter and the executive secretary positions rising from a group 10 to a group 12?
Through the chair, the both positions were level 10s when we got here, and we just could not, and we needed to hire both. We could not find individuals at that pay rate. And also the improvements and the added responsibilities to both of those positions just required it to move up a couple levels to attract the right individuals.
Great, thank you. And then through the chair to the administration on page 98, can you describe the additional nonprofit art organizations added to this year's budget and why they were added?
Madam Chair, we may have mentioned this at the budget presentation. The three new organizations that are, I don't know what to call them, specifically called out in the budget book are $60,000 contracts each for Avenue Black Box Theater, the Hochstein School, and Garth Fagan Dance. The budget also includes $200,000 for community festival support. Community festival support had previously been provided by Comida. Monroe County will take care of that in its budget going forward.
Thank you. Through the chair on page 105, in the 2022 objectives from last year's budget, it was listed relaunch digital content team with the goal of e-content reaching 1/3 of the total circulation by 2023. But this is not listed in the accomplishments from this year's budget. Was that team relaunched? And what percentage of the total circulation does e-content account for today?
Madam Chair, unless a representative from the library is here, I'm going to have to request you respond to this question. Oh, Madam Chair, yes. Reed is here.
And through the chair, just so you know, I have a couple of cultural and educational service questions coming up too. Yes, on page, through the chair, on page 105, the 2022 objectives from last year's budget, it was listed relaunch digital content team with the goal of e-content reaching 1/3 of total circulation by 2023. But it's not listed in the accomplishments for this year's budget. Was that team relaunched, and what is the total percentage, what is the total circulation does e-content account for today?
So we can share more detailed e-content numbers through the chair because I don't have them directly in front of me, but we've been trying to grow to over 1 million. We had over 1 million circulation of around 8 million total circulations of e-content. That includes both streaming services, also ebooks, e-audio, and for some of our member libraries, it includes video content. We did relaunch the team, and the goal was to really try and increase not only our diversity of the collection, but also what we call our holds renewal. For e-content, some of our highest use is the most popular books. And right now we see some of our holds ratios, if they were, being more than 20-to-1, meaning that people are waiting a really long time to get an ebook, longer than print materials for most popular materials. So we've also increased the amount of resources that each individual member library is contributing towards Overdrive, which again is a shared county resource. So this is e-content that's used all across the system, one county, one card. Our e-content is actually everyone's e-content through Overdrive. So the spending and the analysis of the collection has happened with this team. And we will share through the chair more detailed numbers on some of that use and also our increase in spend as a result of that.
Great, thank you. Through the chair on page 106, I guess this is more of an observation that I hope you can comment upon. Why are this year's major objectives for 2023 so vague compared to last year's objectives that had tangible items listed? Any specific project or project goals or anything other than that?
Sure. Through the chair, a two-part response for that. One was that when we were talking with our budget team for the county, we looked at other departments and saw that there was just a more moderated response in some of the reports. In addition, the Monroe County Library System and the Rochester Public Library for the Central Library City Public Services releases an annual report to the community. The annual report is much more tangible in its reach, ultimately, in terms of what we accomplished. And we also have a strategic plan that we've reported on that's listed on our city website, rockcitylibrary.org and libraryweb.org for the county side. We just felt that was a more appropriate venue, that the reach was larger. But if there's feedback that we want to go back to more details, the details and some of a report from the annual report to the community would be reflected here. We're happy to replicate that for a future budget. We were just attempting to try and make it more consistent with other departments.
Thank you. Through the chair, on page 108, with the list of all Monroe County libraries and branches, have we thought of any additional locations to expand to? Any possibility of such in the future, or are we set with the ones that we have?
Through the chair, I'm hoping that most of the legislators have been able to see the Chile Library in its new location. We've been very fortunate to have a number of new libraries for our members across the county over the last decade. We are in consideration for the Rochester Public Library, an additional branch library in our Northeast. The city branches did a study in 2018, and the branch library that was closed in the 1990s, the Pulaski Branch Library, has never been replaced in terms of that service area. And our 2018 plan did note that that is a deficit for the neighborhood in the Northeast, particularly the Portland Clifford neighborhood. So we are working on that. I cannot speak for the city administration, but that is something that the city administration is looking at. And as far as I'm aware, there are not current plans for any additional member library locations in our suburban areas at this time. But we know that at least our Penfield Library Board of Trustees has explored an expansion and renovation project. This NYSED receives, from what I understand, from Monroe County Library System, about $1.3 million in, NYSED is a New York State Education Department. We do receive $1.3 million in library construction grant funding that is competitive throughout the member libraries in the system, but that is funding directly to Monroe County. And we've seen the report and where it's been used in the past. So it is a potential up to 50% match and even up to 90% match for distressed communities. So it's a great resource for member libraries that are looking to renovate or expand. I believe Greece, the city, and Henrietta have been beneficiaries in the past.
Great, thank you. I yield the floor.
Legislator Colby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair, on the, on page 110.
Excuse me, Legislator Colby, can you use your microphone, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Through the chair, on page 110, it states a major accomplishment for the action plan, diverse action plan, to create one for every department. Could that be shared with us? Those plans?
Yes, Madam Chair.
And just, my understanding going forward, those are going to be updated and according to the original legislation, those plans were supposed to be readily shared with us when they're updated. So if you keep that in mind when they update them. On page 1447, it's a new department, I understand. This is there, my own way. We don't print the internet, well, I do. There's a major increase.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, what page number?
I think 447.
447. There's two major increases in the contract services. One is for 60,000 for commercial services. And can you explain what that's about?
Yes. Actually, I might as well just hit them both, Madam Chair, the two big
You
increases.
see the one behind it, yes.
Yes. The $60,000 for commercial services is really for countywide document translation. We know we have to budget for this. Departments aren't adequately budgeting for it. I didn't know where to put it, so I put it in diversity, equity, inclusion.
Excuse me. So will you charge back those departments accordingly, you think, or are you just going to leave it the way it is?
Honestly, Madam Chair, I'll probably leave it the way it is. Right below that is $125,000 for software licenses. This is really something that was requested for the 22 budget, but was just way too late. It's for a learning management software program. I don't believe the department's gone out to RFP yet, but from the conversations the prior director had back in 21, she was under the impression the cost would be about $125,000. So this would be software, not just for Monroe County's use, but the original intent was to market a service to our municipalities as well.
Could you maybe, through the chair, can you explain in a little more detail what the software would do?
Learning management software, Madam Chair, is a tool used to engage employees or contractors and provide an online forum for educational materials. We use it here in Monroe County for mandated trainings like workplace violence, workplace harassment. So it's a similar system like that.
Thank you. On the same page going down, there's the agency contracts for 50,000.
That also, Madam Chair, is new. It's kind of new in 22. Monroe County entered into an intermunicipal agreement with the city of Rochester to begin monitoring the implementation of race commission recommendations. So this $50,000 is to further that intermunicipal agreement with the city of Rochester.
Thank you. Now, moving over to the finance department. Through the chair, on page 143 of the adopted 2022 budget, lists objectives over the last year. But one of them, I could hope you give us an update on the following ones. One, did the finance department complete the goal of 10 hotel, motel tax audits?
Madam Chair, we do 10 audits each year in our audit plan.
Is the finance department confident it is fully incorporating the GANS law into the pertinent operations.
Madam Chair, we have worked with Law Department and our purchasing manager to incorporate Gantz Law in our purchase contracts, including professional service contracts. And we believe we have a reporting system within SAP to monitor MWBE spending against those contracts, and working with our internal audit unit to periodically review contractual compliance and contractual compliance with Equal Pay Act.
Thank you. Through the chair, for an accomplishment in 2023, you state you're going to work with the law department to draft local law for allowing public bids to be awarded based on the lowest and best value. I thought that's the way things have been operating is in current law.
Surprisingly, Madam Chair, actually, no. A request for proposal can have multiple criteria for awarding, but public bids in Monroe County are on lowest price. A local law to allow the option for best value would allow us to insert some other evaluation criterias in addition to low price. And I will clarify for the committee, this is an option to go either way, but when we release the public bid, we say up front at the time of the bid's release how the bids will be selected, low bid or best value.
So through you, Madam Chair, this would be a change in the law, so that would have to come before us for review, I assume?
It would, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, on page 144, could you explain the increase of appropriation of $2 million? It appears purchasing has doubled, the controller has raised $1 million.
Yes, Madam Chair. Within the purchasing office, this budget does account for the addition of 2 new FTEs. Overall, salary and benefits combined are increasing roughly $360,000 of their increase. And another item within purchasing is a reduction, I'm going to call it their charge out. What we see above, we have that bottom line called interdepartmental charges.
I was going to ask you about that.
Those are what we get charged from other departments and what are charge outs, what we charge. Purchasing, in addition to the additional 2 FTEs, the increase in combined salary and benefits of $360,000, their charge outs are being reduced roughly $204,000. So that really explains the change in appropriations for that division. Within our controller's office, in a similar vein, they are also adding 2 FTEs to their staff. Combined salaries and benefits for the controller are increasing $458,000. They have an additional $35,000 in their professional services, and that's really for our financial statement audit and actuarial services, and $10,000 in office furniture and equipment related to a project through environmental services for fire code compliance that's requiring us to move staff around. Lastly, I will touch within the controller's office. And I might as well mention it here also, both the controller and our budget office are including in the proposed 23 appropriations $145,000 each for a software product that can help us automate the production of this god-awful book and our financial statements. Both are an incredibly manual process and a combination of Word and Excel files that get merged into PDF.
Thank you for the detail. Through the chair, on page 724, can you explain the difference between 73 ETA in 2023 compared to 67 in 2022? It appears that there's some new titles.
Overall, Madam Chair, there are 5.5 FTEs included in this budget. The half, however, is part-time. So it doesn't show up in salaries, it shows up as temporary help. but it's a associate management analyst who's retiring at the end of this year, and he offered to come back and help mentor and train the new hires we have. The other 4 FTEs, as I said, were in our purchasing office, which is both a contract management coordinator and an assistant contract management coordinator. And that's basically, those positions need to help that team with the significant increase in the number of contracts that they've been pushing through related to the COVID funding that has come our way, both CARES Act and American Rescue Plan. 2 FTEs with the controller's office is an additional accountant to help with our revenue reconciliations and cash deposits, and a cash management analyst. We have 1 cash management analyst who had a good situation we push $1.7 billion in cash through this county, and we probably need to have a second cash management analyst who manages all the online banking systems and assists the controller and myself with our cash flow projections.
Excuse me, Legislator Colby. I do have a clarifying question for Mr. Franklin. When you stated the part-time person is showing up in temporary help, do all part-time Warner County employees show up under temporary help if they're part-time?
They do. I don't know why. It's long held history.
Thank you. Continue, Legislator Colby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You already kind of answered this question in your presentation, which really took about 5 or 6 of my questions out, by the way. Through you, Madam Chair, how confident, it appears that you're estimating $20 million increase in sales tax. Page 150 is what I'm referring to. How confident are you of the up and down of that? I know it's a crapshoot, but.
Madam Chair, I would not call it a crapshoot. I'm not going to lie. I was sincere when I said sales tax forecasting is both an art and a science. I'll reiterate my commentary that it does reflect a 0.7% increase where we think this year's revenues will go. I think that's a reasonable hedge.
Okay.
I think it reflects the opportunities for growth, but also the very real potential of an economic recession.
Through the chair, on the same page 150, it appears that under appropriate unallowed insurance division is increased by $10 million. Can you explain why? Unallowed.
Madam Chair, our insurance division,
Yes.
the full detail of our insurance division is on page 154, Madam Chair, and you'll see the full layout. Primary driver is our medical insurance. That's probably the biggest increase you'll see. But I do want to make note that the county's cost for general liability and risk management, we have a lot of insurance contracts. The cost of our premiums skyrocket in 22, and they are looking like another increase for 23, and it's a significant increase, probably several $100,000.
Through you, Madam Chair, it appears that the RGRTA appropriations, while there was one last year in the budget, there doesn't seem to be one this year.
Oh, yes.
Appropriation.
Yep, Madam Chair, our contribution to RGRTA, it's the same $3.5 million and change. I don't know when the last time that dollar amount has changed. We did, page 151 of the budget book, we did try and change this up. Historically, RGRTA was its own line. I don't know, we had several call outs for specific items, and we don't know why they were ever specifically called out. So we tried to map this a little bit better to how other departments are presented, looking at contractual services and supplies.
So that got blended in under contracted services?
Yes, but I can answer any questions you got on that.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to know where third line item went to.
So you will see that, Madam Chair, it's the third line on page 151. It's called contribution to other funds. I know they're not another fund, they're another company, but that's where it is.
Thank you. Well, my next question was, why is that fund going up? On the same page, through Madam Chair, can you explain the tripling of the interest earning from year to year?
Probably gonna be more than that, Madam Chair, not gonna lie. 5 million is quite conservative. What has been the dramatic change is yields. Where yields on treasuries, CDs, bank accounts were virtually nothing throughout the pandemic, and even before, they were trending downward. Yields have really taken off in 21. So these primarily reflect investments. We have a collective, this state has a collective investment group, it's called NICLAS. They invest in municipal securities allowed under state law. It also includes a direct purchase of U.S. treasuries. So we have a program of 30, 60, 90, 180 day, and we have small investments that go out 1 year.
One last question through you, Madam Chair. With interest rates in the last 6 months tripling, if not more, how do you expect that to affect your bond, your payments on bonds that you're going to have to issue in the coming year? Was that reflected in this budget?
So, Madam Chair, it's a little different. And actually, bond yields the past month have actually come down 70 basis points. But really what's interesting, okay, now I'm going to be engaging. Really what's interesting with our bond yields is the changing economic environment, right? What helps us is our better rating. You know, Moody's upgraded us, S&P upgraded us, Fitch Ratings has upgraded us. In a time of an economic environment with rising bond yields, so that's interesting. The spread is widened, right? But not as much as the spread was wide back in 2014, 15. It used to be a 300 basis point difference between the AAA and the BAA. We're just not seeing that today. Right now, I tend to measure us against the insured spread, even though we're probably better, closer to A-rated. But even the AAA to A spread is only like 35 basis points. And the 2 to 10 year spread is low as well, like 85 or 90 basis points currently. So the bond yields on next year's borrowing, we had a net interest rate of 4-point-something%. You know, 3 years ago it was 2%. So we are going to pay more. I do account for increasing debt service when I do internal projections for our capital improvement program. But we're in pretty good position with this budget. Like I said, bonded debt service actually is going to come down in the 23 budget. And you'll see in this budget book, based on the current bonded debt, the projection going out 20 years. It's coming down a little bit each year. Now, it'll get chewed up when we go to market next year. But it's another thing, we are very planful and thoughtful in our approach on how to schedule those maturities.
I'll yield the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair?
Legislator, no.
I did have a question under human resources, but I'm going to skip that because I believe Mr. Franklin has already answered that question. It was about SAP and the evaluation of such, which you've already clearly answered, so thank you for that. And thank you, Mr. Brew, for asking that question. Moving to Law Department, I have this on page 433 through the chair. Law Department appropriations, just wondering what the new the $88,000 for computer software is intended for?
I have it in note. I have a note. I have a lot of notes. This specifically is law department is looking to release an RFP for a new case management software to replace what they're using now. So that's hopefully an intended purchase or software license.
Thank you. And through the chair, under information services, I had this on 206. Were the public safety records management program completed that was listed as an objective, for last year?
Madam Chair, I do see our director.
Absolutely.
See my people did that. The computer's out.
Jennifer Cusey, CIO. Madam Chair, could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Was the public safety records management project completed that was listed as an objective for last year?
Through the chair, that was indeed completed. That was a multi-year project.
Thank you. Thank you. And this next question, I think will be back to Mr. Franklin, but it's very similar to the question that Legislator Colby asked under finance. And this was on page 728. Through the chair, can you explain the change from 67.5 FTEs in 2023 compared to the 63.5 FTEs in 2022? It appears that some additional FTEs were added to existing positions. Any new ones besides the Chief Information Security Officer?
Through the chair, yes, we added 3 additional network administrator positions, specifically for our SCADA systems in support of the network for DES. We're adding another network administrator to support all the cloud initiatives that we have, and another one that will support activities down at 911 in support of their systems, such as the CAD system. That is obviously a very critical system and needs additional support.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I yield the floor.
Legislator Don Brofer.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, I have a number of questions for the county clerk's office. On page 344, thank you, through the chair. On page 344, it is listed under major accomplishments, redeploy mobile DMV unit under updated procedures and protocols. I have a number of questions regarding our mobile DMVs. First and foremost, through the chair, has a single mobile DMV been opened at all this year besides the one-off special services following the devastating fire in the Pines of Perrington?
Through the chair, we were not able to successfully deploy the mobile unit until a few weeks ago when we were able to have our first successful event with the jail bureau for the county sheriff's office, where we were able to get the equipment to successfully work in the jail ID program, which we have been restarting, and we actually have another event with the jail starting actually next week.
And through the chair, why are we not back to full previous levels with the mobile DMVs?
Through the chair, as has been previously discussed, we are in the middle of negotiating intermunicipal agreements that was adopted by this body with new potential sites. We have 2 that are in agreements right now with the Village of Brockport and the town of Ogden that are looking to redeploy. Of the previous host, we only heard from 4 municipalities. We are still in conversations with another one. We did speak with East Rochester. We did do a walkthrough with representatives from CSCA and our public safety department, and we were not able to obtain adequate space currently, but we're still open to hear from potential hosts that would like to host mobile DMVs. Prior to this meeting, I hope that all of you did receive a copy of our first annual report, which goes into much more length about the new vision for the mobile DMVs and trying to bring those services out to a lot of our underserved populations through the chair.
Thank you. Through the chair, when we met with the deputy county clerk months ago, we were assured that the mobile DMV would be up and running. Why is there such a delay in getting those up and running again?
Through the chair, technology failures from state-provided equipment continued to plague us until early November, when we were successfully, for the first time, able to get our wireless connectivity to work with the state. They sent us a SIM card in an unmarked envelope through the chair that we had to take some working with to get the state to send the right personnel to come and install properly. They did it, and we were able to deploy the equipment successfully at the jail. And we were able to issue several IDs in a very successful program that we're very excited to continue with the county sheriff's office. Now that we have had this very successful rollout just a few weeks ago, we are fully prepared to have a strong rollout next year. Through the chair.
Thank you. Through the chair, I mean, you just touched base a little bit on the state equipment. And obviously you guys were having some technical issues, but it sounds like you're working through that. But how much would this equipment cost to return it and return to the previous mobile DMV to get the mobile DMVs back up and running again?
Through the chair, this is all state-issued equipment for state connectivity to their servers, so it's not going through any private vendors. It's all completely dependent on the state of New York. The only other thing is, through the chair, we are looking at a new vision for mobile DMVs to continue them at the rates that they were with the previous sites was not sustainable, and we heard particularly from our collective bargaining unit that that was something that we negotiated with them. And that is why we did speak with the Association of Town Supervisors. We've spoken to the Association of Town Clerks. We've invited anybody, particularly the previous hosts, who are interested in having the clerk's office come through with representatives of the union and public safety to do a walkthrough to see if the site could meet the new standards that have been negotiated. We only had four municipalities reach out. 2 of them we are ready to redeploy. 1 we're still in negotiations with.
Through the chair, what is your current staffing levels, and do you have any vacant positions?
Through the chair, we do have some vacancies. I can't get you that exact number, but I can get that back to this committee.
Please do that. Through the chair, what specifically do you need from this legislature to return mobile DMVs to their historical levels of operation, including all previously serviced towns and all the previous dates and times?
Through the chair, we would need the host or interested municipalities to contact us to have that negotiation. We would need those localities to meet the new standards that are set in an intermunicipal agreement that was adopted by this body. And that agreement would also have to be signed by their governing body as well. As I've said previously, we've had a number of those conversations. We've worked with every single municipality who has reached out to us who are interested in bringing these services back. Through the chair.
Thank you. Through the chair to the clerk, to the county clerk, if you've only had 4 people reach out to you from different municipalities, why hasn't your office reached out to any potential host sites to try and get this ball rolling instead of waiting for them to come to us?
Through the chair, we've had several conversations with different towns. We've spoken again with the Town Supervisors Association, the Town Clerks Association. We are also in conversations, as is detailed a little bit in the annual report document that was received, about new avenues to take out the mobile DMV equipment. The mobile DMV equipment is looking to get utilized to help us with Project Homeless Connect, which is trying to help individuals who are currently experiencing homelessness that don't have access to IDs. We're trying to work with also, I apologize, it's right in front of me and I should look at it. Through the chair, we've also had lots of conversations with the city of Rochester, who was interested in exploring, trying to help some of their underserved populations as well. So we're trying to also identify the mobile DMVs not only as a matter of convenience, as 3 of our 4 DMVs are located within the towns. Only 1, our smallest branch, is located within the city of Rochester. We're trying to also help promote access to IDs in the underserved populations. And we're trying to do that through the new negotiated terms with our collective bargaining units.
So through the chair, would you and the administration support an amendment to fund the return of our mobile DMVs to their full operation in 2023?
Through the chair, I'm not quite sure what that funding request would look like. We have vacancy rates, which, as we previously discussed, goes to some of our, the need for us to be able to provide higher salaries for our staff. But again, for a municipality to host a mobile DMV, we need them to be able to sign the intermunicipal agreement with their governing body, which would take a little bit more time of negotiation. And we also need to make sure that we have a safe and secure site at their location in order to provide the service. So we are looking forward to embracing any and all opportunities to redeploy them per the terms of our negotiation with our collective bargaining unit as well.
Through the chair, I know we've asked this question in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've ever received an answer because of confidentiality issues with staff members' names. But have there been security issues at these mobile DMV sites that have created such a hiccup in trying to find new sites and trying to get agreements with municipalities to host these sites?
Through the chair, generally speaking, and again, the mobile DMVs were shut down for the vast majority of my tenure, so I can't speak directly under my time, but from the staff, and again, from the arguments heard in our negotiations with our collective bargaining unit, yes. The other issue that was actually written up in an audit from the state of New York was our cash management and the handling of that cash management, which meant we needed to take additional steps to ensure that not only was our staff secured, but the finances and the cash that we are handling, because DMVs do accept cash, were being properly maintained. And all of those things have gone into the new vision and redeployment of mobile DMVs, which will not be what it previously was, but we are trying to make it something in the future that can perform better, but also help us perform to serve underserved populations, again, through the chair.
Through the chair, I mean, at this point, they're not performing at all because we don't have any, but have there been, I'll ask the question again, has there been any documented incidences at these mobile DMVs? I understand people have expressed concern about it, but have there been any documented incidences at the mobile DMVs in regards to their safety and well-being that has been jeopardized?
Through the chair, we have documented incidents since 2020 at our 4 permanent locations. I can't speak to documented sites from 2019 and previously. I can do my best to find that information for you.
Through the chair, I'm speaking specifically about the mobile DMV sites that haven't been back up. You're saying that the staff has cited that there's been incidences there of safety issues. Is there anything documented on that? I understand the fixed sites have their fair share of problems, but I'm asking about the mobile DMV specifically.
Through the chair, we will look that information up from 2019 and prior, but the same staff that work at our 4 fixed locations are the ones stating those same safety concerns in the brick and mortar branches that they're in now. And that's one of the reasons that led to our negotiated agreement on what the redeployment of mobile DMVs will look like with our staff. Through the chair.
So through the chair, you're basing the mobile DMV redeployment on what the brick and mortar stores are doing. And is there been an increase in security at the brick and mortar places?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. I'll yield the floor because everybody else has questions. It'll just be easier.
Legislator Delahaye.
I just have just a couple of questions here, and I'm gonna just switch up to human services. I'm sorry, did you have any questions? For...
Yeah, I did, Sean.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna yield back to Legislator Brew.
There's a couple of questions regarding the county clerk budget. Through the chair to the administration, Clerk Romeo, you had mentioned that there are 2 contracts which are prepared to deploy now, 2 locations rather. Are there contracts that are presently in place with both of those locations?
Through the chair of, I believe the intermunicipal agreements are both with both host localities. I believe the Village of Brockport has passed theirs, and I believe the town of Ogden is working on some actual security enhancements to some of their space in town hall, which is, I can't speak to if they've passed it or not, but I do know it is with the town of Ogden.
Okay, and a follow-up question to that. So in my interpretation of a contract, the law department might be able to help me out with this. If a contract is in place, that would mean a fully executed contract. A fully executed contract would mean that one that has been signed off by, both the town in this case and the county. So the fact is, they aren't quite in place yet. They are in the works. To the chair.
Through the chair, I will need to follow up on whether or not the town of Ogden has signed, their town board has voted on their intermunicipal agreement. But no, we have no date set for this current month. We do have dates set for January for redeployment.
Okay. Again, to the chair, when a contract is complete, that is stamped into the county, okay? And that is in turn considered to be a valid contract when the county has when the county is in receipt of that contract. So if it's in the works, in my opinion, it's really not quite a contract yet. My next question through the chair is there seems to be a huge disconnect between the residents and the towns of the county. The residents, virtually every resident that I've talked to, when the subject of the DMV comes up, they are all asking the same question, and that is, what's happened to the remote DMVs? So I think that you had indicated that there are some issues with the towns in signing on. I do believe it is incumbent on the county, if you're not getting responsive towns, to proactively go out and solicit between the towns and villages the need to establish remote DMVs. This is something that was done through Maggie Brooks, it was done through Cheryl D'Onofrio, and it was done through County Executive Bello when he was in charge of the county clerk's office. I just thought, we have a different set of challenging circumstances right now, but I still don't understand why we have not been able to move the needle a little further than what we have at this point. So it's not so much a question as it is a request that you double down your efforts and really try to get the remote DMVs up and running to something similar that was pre-COVID. And through the chair to the administration, I have a follow-up comment based upon a response from the county clerk. Yeah, I know there's cash on hand, but you know something? There's cash on hand from virtually every walk-in business in the county. That includes Founders Cafe across the street, and Cruise Dinosaur, Buffalo. They all have cash on hand. They all risk the same amount of unfortunate circumstances, right? I just don't see why the county clerk's office requires a higher standard of protection than the rest of our street-worthy businesses do at this point. So maybe you could help me understand that a little bit more. To the chair, thank you.
Through the chair, as acting as an agent for the state, when we provide DMV services, we are acting as an agent of the state, and we must follow all of the state regulations and rules. The New York State DMV has a very different set of regulations from how cashiers can handle cash and a number of other things. It was the New York State DMV that came down previously while the mobile DMV units were deployed that said that we were not meeting their standards. So we need to make sure that we're meeting all the standards set by New York State DMV because we are acting as the state. In these cases, we're not acting as the county in the county clerk's office.
Okay, so through the chair is a follow-up question. So in remote DMVs, it's my understanding you are now acting as an agent of the state, correct?
Through the chair, anytime we provide a DMV service, we're acting as an agent of the state.
So as a follow-up question to that to the chair, so the state has specifically set forth that requirement that security be provided at these remote DMVs locations.
Through the chair, there is specific cash management and other financial management regulations and requirements that we need to meet that were not being met under the previous format of mobile DMV units. The on-site security presence was part of what came out of a negotiated agreement with our collective bargaining unit.
Okay, so through the chair, that's slightly different than a state mandated site requirement versus something that was requested and agreed to through the local collective bargaining unit, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
A follow-up question, I'm sorry, I'm very passionate about the DMV and the remote DMV services. So did the county clerk attempt to push back on a collective bargaining unit that was trying to, well, successfully, implemented this requirement of having protection at the remote DMVs? Were that, to me, to the chair, to me, that is actually resulted in one of the biggest impediments in providing those remote DMV services, and that is the remote security support that has to go along with these remote DMV areas, right? So did we in any way attempt to push back on that? Because looking back right now, that does seem to be a bottleneck in what we're able to provide to our residents.
Through the chair, without getting into specific negotiations, the security regarding DMVs, both with the mobile DMV units, but our 4 fixed locations, has been a growing concern. It is a constant conversation that is had amongst our staff and our management teams. There was lots of conversations about trying to negotiate fairly about the number of issues that were brought up, that were not just that one about specific area about on-site security. Previously, we had doubled our security presence in all of our fixed local DMVs due to some budgetary reasons. We took them back, and that continues to be another area of contention, I guess I will say. So security continues to be a concern we hear about often, and it's the county clerk's administration is doing the best that we can to manage our financial priorities, access to services, but also making sure that our staff are in an environment where they can feel safe to do their job.
Okay. And through the chair, I promise, this is my last question. Through the chair, to the administration, has there been any consideration for the DMV to go cashless?
Through the chair,
The
that
mobile
would
DMVs.
through the chair, that would have to be a decision from the state, and I don't believe that will happen.
Thank you.
Legislator Colby.
Through you, Madam Chair, you have been negotiating with the town of Ogden for the mobile B to open up, hopefully in early 2023. That was going to be, used to be a weekly mobile D, and now they're stated to only do it once a month. Is that correct? Through the chair?
Through the chair, our goal is that, and I'm just reading this, so this, I don't want to say is definitive, but the goal is that the third Wednesday of every month, Ogden will be able to have their DMV. The goal is that January 18th, we'll have our first unit there.
Is there, since they've gone through the work of moving you over next to the police department, is my understanding, to meet the requirements, is there a reason why you're only doing it once a month instead of a weekly basis, since no other town on the west side has a mobile D department at this time?
Through the chair, there are a number of different matters that were negotiated with our collective bargaining unit. The amount of times that the mobile unit was out, that pulled staff out from fixed locations, was one of those areas. So that was a result of that negotiated agreement, was that there was a less frequency of the units coming out.
I'm not sure how to answer that. So through the chair, basically, how many times can the mobile D department go out in a given month? Through the chair.
Through the chair, our goal right now with the entities that we're speaking to is at least four times a month. But again, we can have more opportunities if we have more host municipalities interested that we're looking to have those conversations with.
Through the chair, I don't understand. If we have more sites, you can go out more often, but you're saying town of Ogden is going to only be limited to once a month? Because the union agreement says they can only go to the town of Ogden once a month? I'm confused here a little bit.
Through the chair, our negotiated agreement was that it would not be redeployed in the same exact manner, which was the daily occurrence of 2 different units that pulled a number of staff from the fixed locations that resulted into the other issues that we had managed with them. Right now, we are working with the agreements and the intermunicipal agreements that we have right now, which is to get these 2 units up and running once a month.
So through the chair, if a town on the west side, east side, has come up with an agreement with you, you cannot service it because you don't have the staffing to do it. Is that correct?
Through the chair, no, that's not correct. We would need to go through the negotiated agreement, and it would likely be similar to once or twice a month.
So,
So this is a very interesting conversation. I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, I think we've already heard that there's an attempt for an amendment. Can we talk about something else?
Thank you, Legislator Roman. I am going to deny that point of order due to the fact that this conversation is very germane to the clerk's office and appropriations and how she runs her business.
So can we talk about the appropriations then and not the way in which through you, Madam Chair, in which contracts are being executed or not?
Again, I'm going to have them continue with their conversation because I do believe this is information that is needed and pertains to the budget and how the clerk's office is run. So thank you. Continue, Legislator Colby.
this is relative because it's might make a difference of what kind of monies relative to that department. Through Madam Chair, so if another area, you can find staff to do that. So until you find those other towns that agree to host you, why couldn't you apply some of that staff in the town of Ogden at this time until you get those other locations? Because I know what's going to happen through the chair, only meeting once a month and not having any other place around, it's going to be backed up like you won't believe.
Through the chair, to reiterate, we have 4 fixed DMV locations. 3 are within the suburban communities of Rochester or Monroe County. 1 is in the city of Rochester. The Greece DMV is within 20 minutes of a number of our west side locations. We have the new Henrietta location that's now closer to 390 in the expressway. All 4 of our DMVs are open to walk-in transactions every day. We have each DMV also having late hours until 6:30 1 day a week. In order to do all of that increased access, it was negotiated with our collective bargaining unit to scale back, but also redirect some of the mobile DMV units. I believe we will be able to perfectly staff any unit that we put out there. If we have more interest, we look forward to looking to more partners to expand the access of our mobile units into the 2023. We currently are going into 2023 with the town of Ogden and the village of Brockport, with Project Homeless Connect going down to the Rundell Library, and we're hopeful to expand that to other partners.
Hopefully one last question on this subject. Probably not. Through you, Madam Chair, has the clerk office, since it seems to be one of the stumbling blocks in all the other towns, the security issue, which we can debate, and I'm not going to, we could debate tonight, all night long, if that's a major issue or not. Has the clerk's office looked at the possibility of supplying the security for those towns instead of putting that burden on our towns that are offering sites free of use?
Through the chair, the clerk's office recently had to decrease our security at our 4 fixed DMV locations because of budgetary concerns. We determined that it is not currently within our budget right now to handle the off-site cost of private security at all of these locations.
I probably have some more questions, but I think I'm going to do them in a written form later time. I'll yield the floor.
Legislator Mafucci.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Welcome to the chairpersonship. First, I would like to thank Mr. Franklin and his staff for their hard work on this budget. And I share Mr. Franklin's passion for talking about the levy and tax rate and watching people's eyes kind of gloss over, but it's important to know about that kind of stuff. So thank you very much. I have a series of questions, but before I do that, I'd like to make a brief statement. As someone who in the past proposed 14 multi-million-dollar budgets over the years, but never a billion-dollar budget, and that's what this county budget is. Budgets have lots of moving parts with budget lines that change. What I like about this budget are the themes: public safety, public health and wellness, economic and workforce development, and infrastructure sustainability. When I was first elected, it was clear the county was seriously fiscally stressed and unable to deliver the services in those critical areas. Over the past several years, the administration and this honorable body, this legislative body, have worked to fix that. That is commendable. Effective budgets recognize nothing happens without money, and budgets need to be adequate, sustainable, and equitable. The revenue supporting the budget needs to reflect those understandings. And more importantly, sustainable budgets must recognize one of the definitions of economics: the allocation of scarce resources. Can't do everything right away. This budget recognizes those characteristics. Now I will ask a few questions. On page 57, in the area of public safety, the sheriff's office is adding 38.5 positions. Can you review the importance of adding these positions and what you hope to accomplish with this significant commitment to public safety? Through the chair to the administration.
We do have a rep from the sheriff's office.
I'm sorry, it's Under Sheriff Corey Brown from the Sheriff's Office. Can I get that question again?
Certainly. In the area of public safety, the sheriff's office is adding 38.5 positions. Can you review the importance of adding these positions and what you hope to accomplish with this significant commitment to public safety?
Sure. So we're adding various positions
Excuse
throughout
me.
the,
Could you please address everything through the chair?
I'm sorry, I forgot.
No
Through the chair, we're adding various positions. So if we start, we're adding positions for our tactical unit. So we're adding, I believe it's 14 total sworn officers. The majority are going to go in our tactical unit to deal with different crimes that occur all throughout the county, to include the city. When there's crime trends or violent crime or any crime pattern that comes up, they'll be available, which will help alleviate our patrol from having to backfill some of those task force or extra crime duties and to stay in patrol. We're also adding a fusion center, which will be adding a sergeant, an investigator, and a deputy. And the goal of that is to really coordinate all crime in the county. So we have wonderful intelligence agencies in the county, and the Monroe County Crime Analysis Center does a wonderful job. And this will be in addition to that. So if we have a crime pattern anywhere in the county where there's obviously suspects don't know boundaries, right? We have boundaries. We have city police and county and the towns and Wayne County, but those doing the crimes don't know boundaries. So this way it'll give us a place where we can coordinate those efforts. We're also using it as part of our ROCTAC, which the Rochester Threat Advisory, so that we can try to interject in people's lives before a tragic situation occurs. So once a tragedy occurs, obviously it's too late. So we work with many different agencies. how many? So we're currently at 27 agencies as part of that team. We work and really try to find solutions to problems. So part of the positions will be helping to effectively run that. And with that, there's going to be somebody from mental health there, and there's going to be analysts that are there, and a coordinator that'll be there to try to analyze everything that's going on and just to monitor what's going on in public social media and things like that to try to go after that. Those are the majority of the positions, and the rest I'd have to look up.
Through the chair to the administration, the Public Defender's Office is adding 20.5 positions. Can you review the need for these added positions?
The chair, Julie Sianka, on behalf of the Public Defender's Office. The majority of that is going towards incentives towards caseload reduction. We're adding both attorneys as well as staff, and the long-term goal is to bring the caseload, each particular attorney down into manageable levels so they can provide quality services to our clients, as well as providing additional staff to support those attorneys.
Thank you. Through the chair, one more just follow-up question. Do you think that do you have enough positions with those?
Through the chair, yes.
Moving on to public health. In this area, there are 33 new positions in the general area of public health. Can you review the specific health areas these positions?
Through the chair, we have 35 additional positions in the health department. There are 2 associate public health representatives in addiction, 5 addiction services outreach supervisors, 1 addiction services grant coordinator, 2 public health reps in addiction, 16 addiction services specialists, 2 part-time 16 addiction services specialists, 1 office clerk 2 bilingual assistant health services coordinators, 3 toxicology 2s, and 1 senior public health educator.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, moving on to economic and workforce development. Direct funding for Monroe Community College is increasing by $750,000. While there is likely more going on than just that additional funding, what role would MCC play in economic and workforce development?
One moment, Madam Chair. Our planning director is here.
Through the chair, can I ask for the question to be repeated? There was no speaker in the back there.
Certainly, through the chair to the administration. Direct funding for Monroe Community College is increasing by $750,000. While this is likely more, there's more going on than just additional funding. What role will MCC play in economic and workforce development?
Through the chair, Monroe Community College plays a crucial role in economic and workforce development for the county. It's a centerpiece of our workforce development strategy. Comida has a 3-year, $1.5 million contract with Monroe Community College called Empower, through which Comida effectively subsidizes real-time workforce training tailored to industry demand in partnership with employers. We actively promote this tool and resource as one of our economic development incentives. Monroe Community College is also being targeted for support through the county's American Rescue Plan priorities, specifically in careers in the healthcare fields. And we regularly connect with our peers over at MCC to talk about future opportunities. I'm in constant communication with Dr. Robin Cole, who leads up workforce development programs at MCC. We also are just in the November COMETA meeting, we drew $500,000 from the Workforce Development Fund that County Executive Bello worked with our board to develop. And we put those funds towards MCC's optics program, which members of this body may know is a one-of-a-kind, world-class program that we have at MCC. And currently it produces just a fraction of the number of optics technicians that area optics and photonics employers need to continue to be successful and competitive. So I guess the shortest answer to your question is MCC is a crucially important partner to our workforce development priorities now and will continue to be very crucially important, particularly as the Forward Center continues to be built out in the city.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, just a couple of quick follow-up questions. What type of feedback are you getting from businesses in the area?
Through the chair, 9 times out of 10 in discussions with businesses today, it's help us find people. We need employees. We have all of these openings and we can't find workers to apply for the jobs. The talent pipeline is not sufficient to meet demands of the area employer base. And then secondary to that, there are concerns and questions in the business community and the economic development community around shovel-ready sites and available and adequate infrastructure to meet the needs of industry demand, particularly in heavy industry, including semiconductors. So Monroe County is regularly, we're in the Department of Planning and Development, we're talking to area EDOs and businesses around ways in which we can be supportive of infrastructure development.
Thank you. One more follow-up question through the chair to the administration. What type of feedback are you getting from students?
Through the chair, we are involved in the Rock 2025 initiative, and which has a talent strategy, and there's a program within Rock 2025 in the chamber that's called Campus Rock, and that's primarily the avenue through which planning and development communicates with college and university students and those communities. If that's what the legislator is referring to, what we're hearing from them is that Rochester, up until now, hasn't really been seen. Greater Rochester and Monroe County hasn't really been seen as a destination for postgraduate employment, but that's starting to change thanks to initiatives like Campus Rock and Rock 2025. We also, through the Monroe County Industrial Development Corporation, this past year set up a program called Retain, and so far we have successfully set up small cash grants to approximately about a half a dozen graduates of area colleges and universities to entice them to work for area companies after graduation. So that program is still in its pilot phase, and we're seeing that attitudes are shifting in a positive direction. Young people are considering Greater Rochester as more of a destination for employment after they graduate.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, and this will be right up your alley as well. What's the status of the commitment of the county to increased broadband access?
Through the chair, we're nearing a finish line so as folks in this body might recall, the county committed $100,000 in the 2021 budget year into this year to produce a study, a community access plan for high-speed internet through a competitive RFP process staffed by planning and development. We engaged with a company called Magellan Advisors, which is a broadband consultancy. And we also convened Monroe County Advisory Task Force on Broadband that's made up of elected officials and stakeholders from throughout the county who have a vested interest in shoring up broadband infrastructure and affordability as it pertains to the digital divide. These stakeholders represent rural communities, urban communities, a really diverse set of perspectives. Where we are currently in this process. So Magellan Advisors, in partnership with the task force, county staff, including those of us in planning and development, DES was involved, IS was involved. We engaged school districts, the library system, countless community-based organizations, Monroe Community College, other partners. We also deployed a detailed survey, electronic survey and hard copy survey countywide, which had very robust participation. Magellan has distilled all of that data and is producing what we're terming a community access plan for high-speed internet. And just in the last couple of weeks, provided some early drafts of the final product to county staff. We're working with them on making some edits, and we'll be reconvening the task force for their input and hopefully their blessing in the coming weeks before we deploy that final report countywide. And we are looking to Magellan to provide some recommendations as to how we can leverage existing federal and state grant dollars and forthcoming expected federal and state grant dollars to incentivize internet service providers to build out more connectivity, make it more affordable. And we're also looking for some recommendations on ways the county can proactively get out in front of procuring devices and distributing devices to communities in need. All of that is very, very much in the works. It's a big homework assignment, as you can imagine. So it's taking a little bit, but pretty soon we'll be at that finish line. And we're looking forward to broad community participation in going over some of those recommendations.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, I'll move on a little bit to community infrastructure and sustainability. Fortunately, Mr. Garland came to Pittsford Rotary. I happen to be a member, and he answered a lot of the questions that I would have had this evening. But I do have one on page 119. Supplies and material costs are increasing substantially, over $4 million. Can you talk about some of the reasons, and do you anticipate these increases continuing?
I'll start off.
Through Madam Chairwoman, we've seen significant increases, particularly for our Pure Waters plant operation. Those prices began to spike in the fourth quarter of this year, and we expect will continue through the balance of the calendar year. We've planned accordingly. We've seen it also in other construction materials as well, too. We've made adjustments in our Pure Waters rates to accommodate that. But our significant drivers within our budget are primarily fuel, chemicals, and energy.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, do you see those costs increasing dramatically, or do you think things will slow down?
Through the chair, we're hopeful that we've seen the worst of that and that we've budgeted accordingly, and we will certainly manage our budget very carefully with Director Franklin's team throughout the year so that we can stay within budget and meet our operational responsibilities.
Thank you. I just have probably just one more question, and then I'll yield the floor to my colleague. This is a finance question, page 56. I'm also, through the chair to the administration, I'm also a fund balance guy. It was a great way to offset tax levies with fund balance. How comfortable are you in our government assigned and unassigned fund balances?
Madam Chair, while the projections on this particular page are just that, projections based on conditions as they were probably back in September when we put this together. The combined assigned and unassigned fund balances are pretty strong. And a couple of significant points I want to highlight because a question of financial position came up earlier. Between the two categories, assigned and unassigned, combined, it's just shy of $126 million in our financial statements, and it's never been that. Unassigned, which is accumulated earnings over time that we do not have a specific purpose or intent, is just over $31 million on our audited financial statements from 21. I don't believe it's been that high since 1999 when the reporting standards have changed. The financial position we've been able to generate has allowed us to support some of the challenges we have. This body has, over the years, discussed the accumulated deficit within our solid waste fund and the roughly $20 million the solid waste fund owed to the general fund. We commented in EPW, the work Director Garland has put in to shore up the finances in solid waste, and I'm quite happy and proud to say that the accumulated deficit in solid waste has been cut in half, and the debt owed to the general fund is down to $12.5 million. We have been subsidizing in this budget $2 million a year for the past several years, and I think I said at EPW, if current trends continue, I think that subsidy can go away in 5 more years. I think this body is also well aware of the financial challenges at Monroe Community Hospital. Our financial position has allowed us to take a creative approach in our assigned fund balance category, and we've created a compensated balance in our general fund for the accumulated deficit of MCH. And the intent is to have an assignment of general fund balance to compensate dollar for the unrestricted loss at MCH, which is just over $49 million on the audited financial statements. We also have, for the first time effort, a strategy to help our executive administration and this body address the lingering employee pay. It's been commented that things have to be sustainable. Well, we have an assignment of fund balance for our contract settlements. They're all settled at this moment, with a couple more to be negotiated at the end of 23. And we have assigned fund balance that can help offset for the next 3 to 4 years an increase. So that 2% across the board pay raise that was agreed to back in, I think it was in June. You know, we have assigned fund balance that can soften the budgetary blow of that for the next 3 to 4 years. And that is important because we don't talk about this often. Everyone wants to shoehorn new ideas into a budget. And what's important is budget stability. And by that, I mean predictability. Managing change is the hardest part of putting a budget together. So when you can take one-time surpluses and use them for either one-time expenses or over the course of 2-3 years to sustain a pay raise, that 2, 3, 4 years is enough time for the budget to catch up, and you won't need that anymore. So the page on page 56, while it is a projection based on what we knew back in September, it does support an improving financial condition of the county. And for those areas that are still in need of support, the general fund is fully able to provide that support.
Thank you. just a last statement through the chair of the administration. You actually answered my second question, because most people don't really know that there's government assigned and unassigned fund balances, and then there's those that are related to our enterprise funds. And you talked about that. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. I yield the floor.
Legislator Barnhart.
A question about festivals through the chair to the administration. I was really excited to see that the county would be having a fund that festivals could access. I've long been very concerned about local festival funding. Some festivals are private, some are nonprofit, but as we saw with the Park Avenue Festival, once one promoter leaves, the new group of promoters had a really hard time figuring out how to make the numbers work without a subsidy. And just up the street at Rock Holiday Village, a hugely successful event that is a public-private partnership. So my question is, through the chair to the administration, how will festivals be able to access this funding?
Although the process is not 100% finalized, we are modeling an application process that's very similar to what we use for Jump Starts and our small and mid-sized art supports program. So we do envision an online application process.
Thank you. That's great to hear because Jump Arts was very accessible. So that would be a really great model to follow. On page 101, I think you just answered my question through the chair to the administration. For the mid-sized arts organizations, is that the model you're looking at for them to be able to access this funding?
Madam Chair, yes, and actually that model was employed earlier this year for the 22 financial awards. It seemed there's going to be some improvements, but it went pretty smoothly.
Thank you so much. Moving on, earlier this evening, we heard from Bridget Hurley of the Children's Agenda. Through the chair to the administration, I was really struck by the stat that nearly half of families qualify for child care funding, and yet many might not be aware that they can qualify for subsidies and that there are ad dollars budgeted. And my understanding is that Mr. Franklin has said there's $50,000 budgeted. I'm curious, is there a line item for that through the chair to the administration?
Madam Chair, specifically for the advertising?
Yes.
You won't see a line item for advertising in this book, but the line item for Human Services Administrative Contracts, I believe it's in Financial Assistance Administration. As they build their contract budget for professional services, they've included $50,000 for advertising.
Okay. So through the chair to the administration, are there performance metrics for those professional services contracts, such as, okay, we want to increase the number of families who enroll by such and such a percentage? Is there a particular goal you're aiming for to get the number of families enrolled increased?
Ma'am, I'm going to first say all our contracts have performance measures associated with them. But if we do have a rep from the Department of Human Services, they may better comment on what their goals are for enrollment.
Good evening, through the chair, Denise Reed from Monroe County Department of Human Services. Like Mr. Franklin said, all contracts absolutely have performance measures. We are actually just looking at the data. If you're not aware, I think what Bridget Hurley was referring to is that in August of 2022, the state actually increased the eligibility levels from 200% to 300%. And so that is the population of families that we're looking to engage to make sure that they know that they're eligible. The state right now, you may notice, even before our advertising, the state has actually begun an advertising campaign. There are currently in Monroe County bus wraps or not wraps, but bus advertisements, billboards advertising through the state program, which will direct people here to the local district. So we don't have a set number right now. It's really just getting the word out. And this $50,000 advertising contract is just a part of a larger endeavor that we've been undertaking for several months now regarding getting the word out about childcare subsidies, including updates to our website and the onboard of childcare navigators that will help us get the word out to the community. Through the chair.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Reed, are you seeing results from the state campaign so far?
Through the chair, we're seeing results of increased applications. I cannot say whether or not it's specifically driven by the state advertising, but we have just been doing a lot of work around daycare eligibility, sharing it with providers. Again, the updates to the website, the onboarding of the Child Care Navigator service through a contract that we secured through a competitive request for proposals with Bain Street Settlement. So we have seen an increase, not quite a return to pre-pandemic levels, but we have seen definitely a rebound in childcare cases and payments made to children and families. But again, we want to focus on individuals who may not realize that they're eligible because the percentage, the federal poverty level percentage has increased from 200 to 300%. And for that specific population of people over 200, well, of course, they were never on before, so that's not really that we're looking for a rebound, but we are looking to see more of those families apply, find out that they're eligible and apply for assistance. We just actually looked at the data this week, and we've gained about 1,200 cases, I believe, and less than 10% of those are people above 200. So we would really like to get the word out to them. And so we're just continuing to explore ways that we would reach those families, which might be different than the way that we reached traditional low-income families. Through the chair.
Thank you. That makes sense. One final question on the childcare piece. The chair to the administration. This is a Mr. Franklin question, I think. Are there extra funds available to increase ad dollars to $100,000 as suggested by the Children's Agenda if that is determined it's needed?
Madam Chair, our administrative allowances under the Child Care Block Grant would allow us to increase our advertising if necessary for the outreach program. I think that would be evaluated after the first 50,000 was spent.
Thank you. That makes sense. Through the chair to the administration, just had a couple questions about child protective services workers. We've had a number of speakers come to the chambers to talk to us about their concerns about vacancies. Have we compared our pay to other urban counties or neighboring counties in upstate New York? Have we considered benchmarking our pay to other urban counties in upstate New York? Or are those, I know that there are a lot of promising efforts underway right now to increase pay with the bonuses and recruitment. Are these things that you're also considering or perhaps as you head into the next contract negotiation? Through the chair.
Madam Chair, our HR director is here who can talk about some of that benchmarking. The short answer is absolutely yes. In a variety of areas of the county operations, we try to benchmark payroll against our regional counties.
Through the chair, when we had proposed the upgrades that went through this summer, we actually did some of that initial benchmarking with our neighboring counties. And while we are not the highest, we are not considerably lower than anybody. We fall generally in the middle. But with the increase that'll come with this next year's contract, that will also help as well. And then we'll be beginning negotiations with FSW this year.
I yield the floor. Thank you so much.
Legislator Roman. Legislator Roman.
And funding for the arts. Can you just touch upon how you believe the hotel motel tax revenue is sustainable and why that justifies a smaller levy commitment?
Madam Chair, our hotel occupancy tax revenue had been trending up prior to the pandemic. I believe everybody knows it took a dive during 2020, has slightly rebounded in 21, and then this current calendar year, 22, we are right back on track to where we left off in 2019. I'm highly confident our revenue projections for next calendar year will be realized. It's roughly $9 million and change, and we're going to hit that this year. I am a little concerned. I did look, people were asking questions about the PGA. So I looked at the past 2019, 2013, and 2008 golf championships here. 2000 hotel tax and sales tax got a bump, except for 2008, which was a recession year. Both occupancy tax and sales tax declined in the recession year. So while I said even the conference board is looking at a recession beginning at the end of this year, lasting for 6 months, I'm a little concerned, but I think where our projections are heading, I'm still confident that the revenue will be realized. And this is generally sustainable. It's not just our hotels. It's, we have a contract with Airbnb since 2018. There's another online provider, Evolve, that we are contracting with who will collect the tax on our behalf. And those have been very favorable to the county.
Through you, Madam Chair, it was mentioned in regards to the community festivals and events and the $200,000 line. Can you provide a timeline from when the administration anticipates for this application process to start?
I probably can't comment tonight, Madam Chair, but we'll respond before full edge.
On page, I've got lots of scratches and things like that, but on page 221, in the Monroe County Hospital, there's a significant increase in net county support. I think there was a mention of some capital improvements. Can you give reasons for this increase and maybe describe more of those improvements?
Madam Chair, really the increase in net county support is not directly related to improvements, but related to the financial realities of healthcare, especially nursing home care. States' Medicaid reimbursement rates have not kept up with the cost of care. Ours facility is highly dependent, exceeds 90% of our census population is receiving Medicaid services. So this really is just a reflection of changing economic environment and the realization that if we're going to have a hospital, we need to
support the hospital.
On page 224, there are reasons for significant increase in net county support from and for the Office of Public Integrity. Can you kind of explain? It's about a $200,000 increase.
The director is here and may want to comment. I will say, we're looking actually to expand the office, adding another auditor position. And of course, with new staff requires a little bit new office space. So they're not moving too far. It's a one floor adjustment. They're over in Times Square. So just one floor change, but the director is here.
Through you, Madam Chair, would you like to comment?
James McNair, Director, Office of Public Integrity, through the chair. That is correct. So we are adding one additional auditor, and with that, we're also going to need more space. So we're moving to a larger space where a couple things we're going to need with that larger space. One right now, excuse me, we're using our conference room is also our break room, which has a refrigerator in it. Not very professional for us to hold our conferences and whatnot. We are accumulating more files, so we're going to need more. We keep our files forever, so we're going to need an additional file room in that. So we're essentially doubling our space, but we're actually only adding one additional auditor at this time.
Madam Chair, can you describe the need for that additional auditor?
Oh, absolutely. So, again, if you're not as familiar with the office, we investigate any fraud, waste, or abuse through the chair. I'm sorry, any fraud, waste, or abuse by county employees or contractors doing business with the county. Actually, the auditor that they have right now, he's with me tonight, Eric Leinenbach. We conduct probably 10 to 15 audits of those contracts a year. Unfortunately, out of those 10 to 15 audits, we find problems with most of them, some major, some minor. We're realizing that with the county doing 800 to 1,000 contracts a year, us only being able to look at 10 to 15 of them because they're very comprehensive, there is a need for us to get more auditors. When you look at government agencies, county or city or state of this size, you'll look at offices that have 3 or 4 auditors. We started our office with 1, and we're grateful that the county has given us another one. I will let you know we'll be coming back for another one just because we need it. And just to be honest with you, we need more auditors. The service that we give to the county is essential. These audits are essential for us to look at and see what's going on. And I would say to pat my guy in the back, he does a great job, but he never leaves his desk. He's there in front of his computer, 8 hours a day, finding these issues. And again, I think it's a great service to the county.
Thank you. That is the last of my questions for right now. I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Legislator Simmons.
Legislator, can you just use that microphone? Thank you.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Franklin, for putting together this presentation and a detailed report. In a recent report, it lists 5 zip codes within Monroe County as listed as poor zip codes. On page 168, what are the reasons why we're spending less money on public assistant benefits? Looks like it's a $16,000 decrease.
Madam Chair.
16 million. Yes. A lot of zeros, right?
Madam Chair, the line item for public assistance benefits, 211 million, a little lower than the 228 you see in the adopted budget. That detail is broken down a little lower, and I'm going to highlight the areas for you because there's only just over a half dozen. It's the support programs, including safety net assistance, family assistance, daycare, adolescent care, and child welfare, and purchase of services. Those are the items that make up our public assistance appropriations. The biggest change you'll see here
is a decline in safety net assistance and family assistance. And that really is just a reflection of the lower caseloads. I think I mentioned we projected the 22 budget to kind of pick up where the pre-pandemic trend left off. The caseloads didn't materialize. So we are still focusing on the same trend going forward, picking up where the pandemic left things off, but we have a lower starting point. So both family assistance and safety net, the budget does anticipate adding 1,000 cases in each of those program areas, but because we're starting a little lower, the necessary appropriations required is a little lower. You also see reductions in child welfare services. And that really is a reflection of the projection of a lower number of foster care placements and the lower cost per case. So it's really programmatic driven.
Before we attend any more questions towards the budget, I am going to ask for a 5-minute recess. I know people have been sitting here for a while, so thank you. I'm going to ask everybody to take their seats so we can continue with our meeting. All right, thank you everyone for that brief recess. The floor is open for any legislator that has any further questions around the budget. Legislator Delahanty.
Please. Thank you.
Okay, I just would actually like to follow up. I just have a few questions for the administration through the chair for Human Services. So I'll give them a second to get set. Hopefully they're still here. Okay, great. Okay. Through the chair, in public health, in the medical examiner's office, what is the current turnaround time for toxicology and death certificate completion?
Through the chair, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rebecca Hartman.
Madam Chair, the average turnaround time for toxicology at the moment is approximately a month and a half, just under 45 days. It varies significantly based on the nature of the case and whatever might be in it. With respect to death certificate turnaround time, I don't have a specific answer for that because, again, it varies significantly by case as well as by our current medical examiner situation.
Okay. And through the chair, what is considered a reasonable turnaround time compared to other counties?
Madam Chair, I would say that 45 days is a reasonable turnaround time and fairly consistent with other counties in New York State. It depends on their staffing versus ours and their caseload versus ours. So we aim for under 3 months because that's what a medical examiner would need to keep up with their standards for turnaround based on National Association of Medical Examiners standards.
Okay. And through the chair, will the increased positions, groups, and funding speed these times up? Is there anything more this legislature can do to achieve this goal?
Madam Chair, I believe these additions and changes in staffing levels will speed up our turnaround times because currently, in order to keep up with the number of analyses that we need to perform in a week to sort of keep up with the rolling caseload that we have, we don't have quite enough people to do every analysis that would need to be done on a weekly basis. So we're looking forward to having some more people that can help distribute that better.
Okay. Madam Chair, I yield the floor.
Legislator Dondorfer.
Thank you. I will be brief in this line of questioning, I promise. Through the chair to Mr. McNair, if you're still here anywhere. When you spoke before, you had made mention that you had one auditor and we have allocated in the budget one more auditor. And it kind of sounds to me like your auditing practices seem to save the county money by finding errors, if I understood you correctly. So my question is one auditor enough? And if not, have we had any discussions with the administration to add additional auditors in this coming up budget year or in years to come?
Through the chair, I know Mr. Frank is going to kick me under the table. So I just want to kind of back up. If you had asked me 2 years ago what this office needed when I assumed this position, I would say we're very short on investigators. We have 2 part-time investigators, so 1 full-time equivalent. So after being in this position for 2 years and sitting back and seeing how we can save the county the most money, now I see this actually through the auditors. Just looking at our annual report from 2021, from the start of the office, and the office only been around 6 or 7 years, we've recouped for the county over $1 million. So I believe that these positions, the auditor positions, are one of the few positions in the county that actually make money, that bring money back to the county, that don't cost the county money. So we did ask for 2 additional auditors during this budget cycle. We were, fortunate enough to get 1, but if you ask me, what do we need? If you look at other departments our size, even our neighbors to the city, if you look at their Office of Public Integrity of other Inspector General offices, city, they have 3. And I will say, to pat my guy in the back again, with the 3, they're doing the same amount of audits that we're doing. So if we added those 2 additional auditors, we would triple the amount of audits that we're doing. Ultimately, the goal would be to find nothing, but then we would move on to risk assessments. So we'd also want to do more risk assessments where we go into the departments within the county, and we have done a couple. And again, just having that outside set of eyes to come in and take a look at the operation, the organization, and see if we can make them or help them become more efficient. We've done that a couple already, and again, we were shocked at what we found, but then we came in and offered suggestions and recommendations, and some of them were, one at least was, very public. So the answer to your question is we would love another auditor.
And not to put anybody on the spot, but through the chair to the administration, is that something that could be renegotiated, or is that something that could be revisited perhaps?
Madam Chair, that will be revisited, as was previously mentioned in the 24 budget. It is not a surprise that Director McNair the request was 2 auditors, and he did mention he'll be coming back next year. So we can plan for that. I do want to say the auditors, Eric in particular, has been doing a fine job, and I will note, however, findings is a little different than a recoupment. While the findings have been very significant in their short time, I cannot tell you with confidence how much of that $1 million has literally been recouped in terms of a check return to the county. There are a variety of negotiations that go on.
Through the chair, I just want to disagree. We have a lot of findings that we don't recoup, which is more than the $1 million. But the recoupments, just recently last year, and forgive me, I don't remember the name of the program, where we were giving out, I don't know if it was money to landlords or whatnot. And then we worked along with one of the departments within the county to do investigations, determine that these were false to the term of, over $300,000 that wasn't given out by the county if we hadn't done the investigation to determine that. And other ones, but there's other contracts that we look at that we have findings that, we make recommendations that we go after the money, and for whatever reasons I'm going to get into, we decide not to, but I guess we would, kind of disagree on that point. But, it's good to have some disagreement at times, especially with Mr. Franklin.
I yield the floor. I have no further questions.
Madam Chair.
Legislator or Milne.
I'm going to have just 3 quick questions. Actually, 2 are for public safety. So while we're waiting for them, I'll ask a question of the administration to save some time. So Madam Chair, through you to the administration. In the clerk's office, the legislative clerk's office, there are decades of physical proceedings and records stored in the office all the way back to the first meeting of the Board of Supervisors. I feel it's very important to preserve this as public history and something to utilize.
would the administration commit to assisting the legislative clerk's office in obtaining a grant to digitize the historical records of the clerk's office?
Through you, Madam Chair. I guess we would be interested in finding a solution to that, whether or not it was grant money or not grant money. At this point, I'll be honest, I'm not sure here who's in charge of this, but I know that there are a number of departments and there are a number of different internal groups that are seeking grant money for this. But by all means, if the legislature has a need for that, that's something we would definitely look at addressing through future years budgets. And I would tell you, I'm probably not somebody to work on that because I wouldn't get much done. I'd be looking at the documents. So that's.
Be looking for a follow-up question to that, though, through the chair. Mr. McCann, would the legislative clerk's office, would they work through you for that, or who would we direct them just to follow up with?
Madam Chair, yeah, I would recommend going through Mr. Franklin.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And again, my next two questions, which I know Director Tantillo doesn't like me to combine questions, but this is going to be an easy one. But first of all, sir, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for all the work that your team, yourself, your team, and Mr. Henry do. We appreciate all your service to our county. Just wanted to know if we could get an update on the status of finding a probation director, and then also I think we're looking for a youth bureau director. That through, hoping I'm going through the right. Where's that Human Services?
HR.
I apologize. I'm thinking public safety.
Through the chair, we have continued to actively seek a probation chief or chief probation officer. It goes with a couple of different titles, whether they call it probation director or chief probation officer. That search has been extensive. The county is taking that position very seriously based upon the recommendations that have been made along the way to enhance the position and the operation of the probation department. Based upon recent meetings, we feel very confident that we will have a person in place very soon.
And the same with youth bureau?
Through you, Madam Chair. We have a candidate who has accepted an offer for the Youth Bureau position, so that person will be starting in January. If I could just sort of add a little bit on to what Director Tantillo has said. There's been a vacancy in that position. And again, just to speak a little bit to the role of OPI and Director McNair in their work with this. We had an issue that was identified. There was a report done in conjunction with an outside consultant of some things that needed to be addressed. And I just would like to stress that position is vacant, but I would just like to publicly acknowledge the role and the job that Director Tantillo has done, and Deputy Director Henry have done in terms of being involved in the day-to-day operation of that, and with working with the existing staff there in terms of addressing and leading that department. So, we don't want people to have the idea that there's been a long-term vacancy and there hasn't been leadership there. It's been working. We have made improvements, but obviously with all of the duties on the plate of public safety, it's not sustainable. And as Director Tantillo says, we expect to have a resolution of that relatively soon.
Thank you very much. And Director, again, my thanks to you and your team. I yield the floor.
Legislator Colby.
Madam Chair. I'd like to, through you to the administration, through the chair. Didn't I say it?
Keep going.
Okay. We talked about the $200,000 for the festival is a new line item. Did I hear correctly that up until this year was in the Comida budget before? Is that correct, through the chair?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yes, Madam Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, do we know how the Comida design or divvy up that money in the past? Do they have a program or don't?
Madam Chair, I think we'll have to research that and, oh, we have our director.
Through the chair, thank you for that question. Comida in years past has had a community program support budget through which we draw some support for programs, including the International Jazz Festival. Notably, we conditioned so there's only been, in the last few years, there's only been one jazz festival, the 2022 Summer Jazz Festival. We conditioned support for the festival this past summer on workforce development and economic impact of the festival, and particularly the free component of the festival, the many free headliner shows.
Through the chair, so the only festival you supported in the past has been the Jazz Festival through Comida?
Through the chair, no, we have supported other events and festivals, including the Fringe Festival, as well as smaller. There's an agriculture fair that's hosted every year by the Genesee Country Village and Museum. So to a lesser extent, but the Jazz Festival is the most significant example where Comida has supported a festival or event.
And so through the chair, you're not going to do that anymore. That's all going to become part of the county regular budget. Is that correct?
Through the chair, it's according to state statute, industrial development agencies are not supposed to sponsor events. The Industrial Development Agency can enter into contracts with organizations to provide economic development services for the county. Previous administrations had leaned more heavily on Comida to furnish support for things like the Jazz Festival. And thanks to innovation and forward thinking on the part of this administration, we're rightfully transferring ownership of that to the county. Obviously, festivals are very important. Arts and culture is important in terms of economic development and impact, but it's a more just fit for the county and county leadership to take that on rather than Comida.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with that. Just for a numbers thing, has it been about 200,000 what Comida was using, or were you using a larger or smaller figure?
Through the chair, Comida was spending a little, I will have to get back to you about specifics, but a ballpark around that amount, if not a little bit less than that amount.
That's accurate enough. Thank you. I'll leave the floor.
Legislator Masucci.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Through you to the administration, just a statement. I'd like to thank Mr. Franklin for including pages 382 to 390. The multi-year budget forecast. It's based on educated assumptions. It is an essential read. It reinforces government is about services, how important it is to ensure funding is adequate, sustainable, and equitable. And I appreciate your talents in ensuring that.
Legislator Roman.
Because I'm looking at the legislative budget and the clerk's budget through the chair, and because we are having, in my opinion, a historic moment today while utilizing much needed services. Through the chair, through the administration, when we're talking about interpretation services, where does that show up in this budget? I know that has been a point of conversation and contention when trying to figure out how we ensure accessibility.
Chair, depending on how the staff approached that particular service, you will either find that on a budget line for commercial services or professional services.
Madam Chair, so contact, I'm sorry, you said commercial?
Yes, ma'am. Sometimes, depending on how purchasing works with the department to set up the purchase order, and how the service was procured, the expense will be directed to commercial services. Sometimes will be directed to professional services. I see the clerk of the legislature has a $7,000 budget for professional services. It's going to be my guess. That's where you're going to find ASL interpretation.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the minutes from the October 25th, 2022 meeting before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of day. Next item on the agenda is new business. Mr. Clerk.
Referral 22-0333, authorized grant contracts and appropriation transfers pursuant the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA.
So we moved by legislator Delahanty, seconded by legislator Brew, legislator Roman, legislator Mafucci, legislator Vasquez Simmons, excuse me. Okay, is there any discussion? Legislator Brew?
Yes. Vote, if I may. Stand up for this one. I'm proud to support this this funding referral, but I must say that there was a little bit of a bumpy road in getting to where we are right now. And to quote Bon Jovi, there were a number of times when I heard from a number of the CEOs around the county, I felt like I was shot to the heart. And I'll explain myself here. And I'd like to clarify, in doing so, some of the misinformation that's been spread regarding the ARPA funding allocation, if I may. There's been misinformation spread that the majority caucus has delayed this funding. This is completely and utterly false, and you can tell simply by reading the referral, which states, authorized grant contracts for terms to commence on or after January 1st, 2023. Again, this is not delayed. If this isn't clear enough, this means that even if the full legislature adopted this immediately upon submission with zero review, the contract still would not be able to commence until January 1st. I find it disappointing that legislators performing their duty as elected responsibilities of responsible people of physical oversight would be accused of delaying funds that cannot be released until January. If there is anyone in this room who doesn't believe that one of these largest funding allocations ever put before this legislature requires thorough vetting, then we are not properly representing our constituents. I fully support funding organizations in Monroe County to provide services to the neediest members of our community, particularly our veterans. To name a few, the Mary Cariola Center, Lifespan Food Link, Child Care, workplace development, the list goes on. And I spoke personally, as I mentioned, to many of the CEOs, explaining to them basically what I'm stating right now, that we are not delaying this, and that there was some input that was needed, that we felt that there was some worthy organizations that were not on the list, and that the existing list was not altered in the least. I want to thank the administration for the caucus-wide briefing and allowing review of all scoring sheets and applications. However, the administration to this date continues to spread misinformation about delays, even on our taxpayer funding webpage. And I have asked for this to be taken down by the webpage a number of times. I'd like to thank the administration for agreeing to expand legislature involvement in the future RFP, RFQ selection committees, and for their commitment to utilizing further ARPA money for our struggling EMS and fire agencies whom have been left out from support for far too long. I will be wholeheartedly supporting this referral tonight, following a satisfactory review of the spending proposals, particularly for our veterans' families, and knowing that future ARPA allocations will be dedicated to our public safety agencies. Thank you.
Legislator Barnhart.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the staff that worked very hard on this process, from the public input stage to reviewing applications and to making these selections. There are some very exciting proposals and projects being funded, and I'm very pleased to support these awards. I do, however, want to express my dissatisfaction with the way these awards were announced. On September 22nd, I received an invitation to the unveiling of the ARPA awards at a press conference. We had been given very limited information about the grants, only a couple lines per grant, even on multi-million-dollar awards. That day, I asked for all of the applications. There were 21 people on the email in which I did that, including members of the administration. 1 month later, on October 21st, I still had not received the applications, and I asked if I needed to file an open records request to get more information about these awards. I was then told I could make an appointment to come view the applications in person, which I did. This was just a few days before we were scheduled to vote in the Ways and Means Committee. I was unaware at that time that the majority would hold the item. I didn't know until we got to the committee. I came prepared to vote that day. Meantime, while I had no information, a number of press conferences announcing the awards had taken place, all conveniently featuring politicians running for re-election right before the election. Agencies and the public had the impression the grants were a done deal, and the press releases did say proposed. We got emails from nonprofits saying, where's our money? We've been awarded this funding, where's our money? And who could blame anyone for thinking that? That's not what people heard. People didn't hear proposed, they heard celebration, we're getting all this money, which of course puts legislators in quite a bind. The applications, when I viewed them, the summaries in particular provided sufficient information. I felt very comfortable to support the funding, recognized the hard work that went into this, really didn't understand why even just the summaries couldn't have been provided to the legislators. I think it could have prevented a lot of this, frankly. I really feel like we were treated like a rubber stamp. I think legislators were really kept in the dark about specifics of the awards. And while this celebration was going on and people were obtaining a political benefit, and then, the political benefit continued while bashing those who wanted more information. Now, the administration does share blame in the problems and the confusion caused here. We do have to go through a legislative process. I was ready to vote back in October, but I do think legislators, and I really don't understand all the things that have gone on behind the scenes and the things that the majority has requested here. I'm glad to hear that we will be kept more in the loop in the future. But I do think that legislators could have been initially assisted much more in doing our due diligence and to really help offer support much sooner and to feel really good about this. But tonight I feel good about it. It's very obvious when I sat down to read the big binders, how much work went into this, how much work the agencies put into this, the nonprofits, and I'm very excited to be voting yes. And so I thank everyone involved. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0358, commit general fund unassigned fund balance for the specific purpose of funding climate action initiatives as recommended in the adopted Climate Action Plan Phase 1 of Monroe County.
Moved by legislator Brew, seconded by legislator Dondorfer and legislator Milne and legislator Delahanty and legislator Roman. Before I yield the floor to a legislator, I just want to say this legislation was referred to the Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee during last month's Ways and Means meeting for more information. And the Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee has issued a specific spending plan with specific proposals and allocations, which was distributed to the legislator clerk. I was planning to offer the floor to our legislative members on the Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee who are on tonight's committee. Legislator Milne and Legislator Udelson to speak about the findings of the CAP Advisory Committee. Legislator Udelson is excused for tonight's meeting, so I'll extend the offer to Legislator Milne if he wishes to address the floor. Legislator Milne.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I would just like to again thank the Climate Action Plan Committee for all the work that they've done. It's been a pleasure to serve on it thus far, along with Legislator Delahanty, Legislator Udelson, and Legislator Sue Hughes Smith. As you've already mentioned, the committee did come back with a very detailed summary of what this money is going to be spent on. And I think it's very important to mention that these are tangible, measurable items. We reviewed these in detail with legislators from both sides of the aisles, and I know I'm happy to speak along with Legislator Delahanty and Legislator Sue Hughes Smith to support this, and we hope that this group will move this process forward. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item. Yes, Legislator Brew.
Yes, I'd like to take the opportunity to move that the,
Legislator Brew, this
Yes.
was, I think we have one more on that.
oh, I'm sorry.
$2203.73.
Yes. Referral 22-0373. Authorize the sale of county-owned tax foreclosure property located at 471 Hamlin Center Road in the town of Hamlin.
Moved by legislator Dondorfer, seconded by legislator Colby. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, Legislator Brew.
I'd like to move the agenda as one with the exception, and I hope I do have this right, with the following 6 referrals. 416, 423, 427, 429, 430, and 431.
Looking to
Second.
move. Thank you. So moved by legislator Brew, seconded by legislator Dondorfer and legislator Mafucci. Any discussion?
And this is a motion to move the rest of the agenda as a whole, except for referral numbers 22-0416, 22-0423, 22-0427, 22-0429, 22-0430, and 22-0431.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0416, approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Monroe County Executive and the Monroe County Airport Firefighters Association, IAFF, Local 1636, AFL-CIO.
Moved by legislator Dondorfer, seconded by legislator Colby, seconded by legislator Mafucci, and seconded by legislator Vasquez Simmons. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0423, approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Monroe County Executive and the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and the Monroe County Deputy Sheriff's Association.
Moved by legislator Colby, seconded by legislator Milne, seconded by legislator Mafucci, and seconded by legislator Vasquez Simmons. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0427, mortgage tax distribution.
Moved by legislator Milne, seconded by legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0429, authorize a contract with Paragon Compliance for providing the yearly Affordable Care Act, employer reporting, and preparation of annual 1095C statements to employees and retirees.
Moved by legislator Delahanty, seconded by legislator Brew. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0430, acceptance of a grant from New York State Board of Elections for absentee ballot prepaid postage.
Moved by legislator Brew, seconded by legislator Vasquez Simmons and legislator Roman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0431, amend Resolution 118 of 2011 as amended by Resolution 226 of 2018 to extend the contract with Health Economics Group for third-party administration of Monroe County's flexible spending account benefit, qualified pre-tax parking program, and health reimbursement accounts.
Moved by legislator Dondorfer, seconded by legislator Colby. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, item carries. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? I would like to thank Mr. Franklin and the department heads for being here tonight and answering our questions. There being no other matters, the December 8th, 2022 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Ways and Means Committee is scheduled for Tuesday, December 20th, 2022 at 6 p.m.